6 o'clock and a minute past 6 Central African time. A very good morning to you. Welcome to Rise and Shine here on Channel Africa. Brand new day. It's a Monday, a brand new week as well. And we're coming to you live from our Johannesburg studios in South Africa on www.channelafrica.co.za is where you can connect with us. And on YouTube, we live stream via @Channel Africa 1 and also on the SABC Plus app for mobile phones. My name is Asanda, Beda.
Hello, Asanda, Beda.
And a happy Monday to you.
Did you have a good weekend?
I did. It was a good one. And yours?
Mine was delightful.
Of course it was, because of what happened in the
yes.
sports that we
Manchester United beat Liverpool 2-1. That's fantastic. Football's an amazing sport. Yeah. Anyone can beat anyone on any day, but we really needed that win. So I'm delighted. Yeah, thank you.
There's always emotions with football.
So, thanks for tuning in. Start of a brand new week. And look, it's probably going to be another news week. Last week was quite a thing across the continent. And this week, I think, is going to be pretty much the same. So, a couple of things that we're looking at. First of all, I had an interesting conversation with an analyst looking at the IMF World Bank annual meetings that took place last week, and you want to find out why that's important to you. And we'll also be touching on the story of Zimbabwe's ruling party ZANU-PF. There are moves to extend President Mnangagwa's rule to 2030. A lot of concern around that. So we'll be looking at that story and others, and maybe even touching on Madagascar. But all of that is going to happen after the news with Onele Nsinsi, and your sports headlines with who's it? Musibudi Makura. Yay!
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter, and a very good morning to our listeners. Madagascar's military leader, Colonel Michael Randrianarina, has promised to grow the country's economy and instill change. He has been sworn in as president this days after taking control of the island nation in the wake of youth-led protests that forced out his predecessor, Andre Rajoelina. However, the African Union and the United Nations have condemned the coup. SADC has since deployed a fact-finding mission led by Malawi's former president, Joyce Banda. Colonel Randrianarina says a new chapter is being opened for the country.
We place good governance, a culture of transparency, accountability, efficiency, and the principle of zero tolerance at the center of our actions. We also commit to taking all necessary actions and measures against the enemies of our republic to redress the wrongs suffered by the victims during the popular movement and to guarantee the free exercise of fundamental rights and freedoms, including freedom of expression and respect for the law.
Kenya's former Prime Minister Raila Odinga has been buried. He was laid to rest in a private ceremony at his farm in Bondo in Western Kenya yesterday. He died at the age of 80 in India, where he was receiving medical treatment. Odinga spent many years as an opposition leader, losing 5 presidential campaigns, most recently 3 years ago. The BBC's Shangai Nyoka.
Mr. Odinga's body was transferred to his ancestral home 60 kilometers west of Kisumu yesterday after 3 days of well-supported public events. The church service this morning will be followed by a burial ceremony for close friends and family. Reports suggest Mr. Odinga will be buried next to his father, Oginga Odinga, Kenya's first vice president and a prominent figure in the struggle for independence. Since the news of his death on Wednesday, tens of thousands of people, including politicians, have turned out to pay their respects to the revered pro-democracy opposition politician.
3 witnesses are expected to testify before the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry in Pretoria, South Africa this week. Proceedings will be partially heard in camera from today to Wednesday. The witnesses' testimonies are expected to be in relation to their experiences as detectives investigating criminal cartels, Sbahle Mota reports.
Proceedings are expected to continue this week in line with the ruling handed down by Chairperson Justice Mbuyiseli Madlanga last week. Justice Madlanga ruled that witnesses this week will testify via audio in a remote location. This is also in line with an agreement reached between media houses Daily Maverick and Media 24 and the Commission's evidence leaders. Last week, Witness X, who was testifying remotely through an intermediary, encountered technical challenges which are believed to have threatened their life.
South Africa's Health Minister, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, says his department is aware of some patients who abuse the health system by going to different facilities to collect the same medication. He was reacting to the discovery of boxes of antiretrovirals in the wreckage of a bus crash in the Limpopo province last week. Motsoaledi says the reasons they are able to get away with the practice is because systems at health facilities are not yet synchronized around the country.
Quite a number of people, sometimes even South Africans, do that, moving from clinic to clinic, getting treatment, getting the same thing, because the system cannot catch them. Most people, let me be clear, most Zimbabweans do that because while they are in South Africa to collect ARVs, they want to stockpile to go home. In other words, instead of taking your share of 1 month, you take a 6-month share so that you no longer have to come back to South Africa again, which is very wrong and stupid, and it causes problems in our public health services because then we run out of drugs as if we ran out of stock.
Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news, Morocco crowned champions of the FIFA Under-20 World Cup, while South Africa, both the men as well as the women's team, are crowned Hockey Africa Cup of Nations champions. I'll tell you more at the bottom of the hour.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
It's 9 minutes past 6 Central African Time, just in case you're watching. At this time, every day after the 6 o'clock news, we bring you what we like to call the Africa Roundup. And essentially what it is to wrap up the top stories and events that took place across the continent in the last 24 hours in a concise manner so that you're fully caught up with the important news events that have taken place, and hopefully it sets you up for the news day ahead. And we do this with our team of journalists and correspondents across the continent that make sense of all of those stories for us. And we begin with this one that takes us to Madagascar, where Colonel Michael Randrianirina, the leader of Madagascar's recent coup, was officially sworn in as president on Friday. This amid cheers, blaring trumpets and raised swords. Yeah, his inauguration comes just days after he seized control of the island nation following youth-led protests that ousted his predecessor, as Alice Rizzo now reports.
Today marks a historic turning point for our country. With a people in turmoil, driven by the desire for change and a deep love for their homeland, we joyfully open a new chapter in our national life.
Former leader Andry Rajoelina, who was impeached by lawmakers after fleeing abroad, refuses to step down while in exile. Both the African Union and the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres have condemned the coup. However, the High Constitutional Court ratified the army's takeover within hours of it happening. Randrianirina has said that a committee led by the military will rule for up to 2 years alongside a transitional government before organizing new elections.
We move to Southern Africa now, where in Zimbabwe, the ruling ZANU-PF party has unveiled plans to amend the constitution to extend President Emmerson Mnangagwa's term by 2 years, taking it through to 2030. Opposition politicians have denounced the move as illegal. The proposal, approved at a party conference on Saturday, would lengthen the 83-year-old leader's second 5-year term, which is currently due to end in 2028. ZANU-PF Secretary for Legal Affairs, Ziyambi, has more.
In recognition of the extensive developmental milestones and the significant socio-economic progress achieved under the leadership of the President and First Secretary of ZANU-PF, His Excellency Comrade Dr. E.D. Mnangagwa, it is resolved that his term of office as President of the Republic of Zimbabwe be extended beyond 2028 to 2030. The party and government are therefore directed to initiate the requisite legislative amendments to give full effect to this resolution to ensure continuity, stability, and the sustained transformation of the nation.
And in Kenya, in East Africa, dozens of mourners were injured on Saturday at a memorial service for Kenyan opposition leader Raila Odinga. This as swelling crowds led to chaos. Some of the seriously injured were taken to a nearby hospital, and that's according to a Kenyan Red Cross official speaking to Reuters. David Doyle picks up the story.
Dozens of mourners were injured on Saturday at a memorial service for Kenyan opposition leader Raila Odinga, a Kenyan Red Cross official has said. That's as crowds swelled at the Jomo Kenyatta Stadium in the city of Kisumu. The official said some were in a critical condition and had been taken to a nearby hospital. Kenya's Standard newspaper wrote on social media that hundreds had been injured. The latest incident follows chaos at Odinga's state funeral. Aid group Doctors Without Borders said 2 people were killed and more than 160 injured in Nairobi on Friday. Odinga commanded a passionate following in Kenya, and a public viewing of his body on Thursday also turned deadly when officers opened fire to disperse huge crowds. 3 people were killed, according to police.
Rwanda and Senegal signed 5 bilateral agreements on Saturday aimed at boosting cooperation across key areas of mutual interest. The ceremony took place in Kigali, Rwanda's capital, during Senegalese President Bassirou Diomaye Faye's 3-day state visit, which began on Friday. The agreements were signed in the presence of Rwandan President Paul Kagame and President Faye following discussions on areas of shared strategic importance.
Dear brother President Faye, once again, it is a pleasure to welcome you and your delegation to Rwanda. Your visit means a great deal to us. Mr. President, we are very happy that you will engage with some of our institutions during this visit. This is an opportunity to explore more areas of collaboration between us, the 2 countries. Rwanda deeply values Senegal's friendship and your personal leadership, Mr. President. Thank you very much for honoring our country with a state visit.
Boston-based hologram studio Gemini is testing the use of hologram displays to deliver breast self-exam and cancer awareness content to women across Ghana. This in partnership with surgeon Dr. Beatrice Wiafe Adai and her non-profit Breast Care International BCI. Cara Angeline reports.
The holograms were shown during Breast Care Awareness Month in communities for the first time in October 2025. If a formal pilot is approved, the group aims to circulate about 50 portable units that show Wiafe Adai's recorded content or live interactive talks and demonstrations. Joanne Stanway is the CEO of Gemini.
And so that's the basis of our pilot program, bringing content that she's created that talks about early intervention, breast self-exam instruction, myths and misperceptions, and of course the main goal is to reduce that very high mortality rate from late-stage cancer.
Breast cancer is Ghana's most commonly diagnosed cancer in women and a leading cause of cancer death.
That's how we come to this Monday's edition, or the end of the Monday's edition of the Africa Roundup. We'll do this again tomorrow after the 6 a.m. news. And coming up, we'll delve deeper into some of those stories covered in the Africa Roundup with our resident analyst, Mighty Jamie, to get more detail and analysis on what's happening in and around our continent. I'll be in conversation with him. Stay tuned.
África. Conhece o Ntivani?
Claro que sou eu.
Ntivani é o amante da música de corpo e alma.
Eu amo música africana.
Ele aprecia todos os tipos de melodias e passa os seus dias a ouvir a Channel África. Adivinha só, a Channel África quer ajudar o Ntivani e os amantes da música em todo o lado a descobrir ainda mais música incrível. Por isso, a Channel África está a convocar artistas africanos a submeterem as suas músicas. Músicos, lembrem-se de nos dar todas as informações relevantes no music@channelafrica.co.za. As submissões são a vossa oportunidade de ser ouvidos, mas não garantem inclusão na lista. Todas as submissões serão cuidadosamente analisadas para verificar se cumprem os requisitos da nossa estação. Canal África, a perspectiva africana.
New day, new stories. Start your morning right with Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
It's almost 18 minutes past 6 Central African time. Let's get into this segment that we call the Roundup Wrap. We bring you this on Mondays here on Rise and Shine, delving deeper into some of the stories that we touched earlier on the Africa Roundup with our resident analyst, Mighty Jamie, and to throw forward to the week ahead as well. Good morning, Jamie. How are you?
Morning to you, morning to all of the viewers and listeners. I'm good, but Cape Town, we had a big disappointment yesterday. Couldn't run the marathon.
Oh, no. No. So what's going to happen after all that training? Can you imagine?
Well, at least for me, it wasn't that much training. But the people who had done a lot of training for it were aiming for personal bests and all of that. So they said they would probably give people some refunds for next year's entry. But obviously, attending a big race like, a Cape Town Marathon comes with a lot of costs because people have to fly down, they have to book accommodation. Some people come there 2 or 3 days before to try to do shakeout runs and get healthy. So it was a bit unfortunate that they didn't get a chance to test their bodies against, Cape Town.
Yeah, another unfortunate one, the passing of Raila Odinga, the opposition leader in Kenya. There are thousands of mourners and dignitaries gathered in Western Kenya on Sunday as he was laid to rest near his home in Bondo by Lake Victoria. The Anglican service and burial were held peacefully, as much as we know that previously those mourners who had gathered got injured and there were deaths, at least 5 people dead as well. We know that about 160 people have been injured and some seriously. Do you think this figure of 5 people dead could rise?
Well, we'll have to wait and see. I mean, these type of events, whenever you start to hear about deaths and you start to hear about, whatever skirmishes may have happened, those initial projections do go up. But I mean, to talk about his life and to talk about some of the contributions that he made, I think one of the big things about him is that he did try to strengthen Kenyan democracy, and he did so in a variety of ways. And I think that's what he'll be given credit for. In the first instance, he was opposed to the one-party dictatorship of KANU, and he went to jail actually for trying to orchestrate a coup, which he was heavily involved in, as we got to find out later on. But initially, we were not aware of that. If you were to recall, he spent, I think, 6 years in the 80s actually under arrest for that coup attempt. He ran for presidency 5 times. And that in and of itself, I think, was significant because he was providing a counter voice to, the dominant political party at the time, and also was trying to show, that this is something that is worth doing and worth fighting for. And looking at the discourse in Kenya and some of the social listening that I was doing around about this time of death, it does look as if Kenyans, they did want to give him an opportunity, but he just couldn't get enough support to cross that line to enter into presidency. And in this particular last run, I think it may have been a wise decision because, as we can see, he was not well. He had hypertension, he had diabetes, and a variety of other, diseases which affect Black men predominantly. But I don't think he would have lived through this particular presidential period. So it was a bit of an unfortunate situation that he didn't win and then passed away in this manner. But looking at some of the other significant parts of his life, in the 2017 election, I think we saw some violence, we saw some skirmishes, and we saw, a big contestation around the legitimacy of that particular election. But we also were able to see Odinga and Kenyatta sign, a document, and they shook hands, and they were able to go into a period of national unity. And I think that showed as well that he had the capacity to be a nation builder, to be somebody who could unite across party lines. And I think that was something that was also significant about his life. He served in a variety of positions, at some point being prime minister, other points occupying cabinet positions. But he's been a big figure, as was his father to an extent, in Kenyan politics. And I think he will leave a vacuum in Kenyan politics that people will have to think about. There's always that conversation about, him dying in another country, getting medical treatment. Does that speak to the quality of healthcare in Kenya? I think it does to an extent. We want to get to a point where African nations don't have to have the situation where prominent leaders or elites have to go to other places to get adequate healthcare. But I think long and short of it, I think is somebody that there are fair criticisms of in terms of his legacy, and, violence will be one of them, in that there's been, violence around his life, and even now in his death, there's, loss of life, and that nature of conversation will exist. And also there are these conversations that are happening in terms of his contribution to strengthening democracy in Kenya, to making sure that the youth of Kenya are protected when they protest, giving them that support, giving them that backing. And I think that there will be many in Kenya who will feel, that they've lost a giant at this time of his passing.
Certainly a number of points that are significant in terms of the legacy he left, especially on the political landscape of the entire country. But what do you think is the significance of his legacy when it comes to particularly the opposition in Kenya?
Well, Kenya has a robust opposition, and I think that he was one of the people who made sure that there's a robust opposition, and that you have these multiple parties and, coalitions that form every now and again to challenge, the incumbency, so to speak. So he was a big factor in that. And one of the big moments, I think, is when Uhuru Kenyatta was pushed into the party. He was a senior party leader at the time in KANU. And as a result of them pushing in Uhuru, he split away because he thought, actually, we need more senior people to be able to run the country at the time. And that, I think, created this opposition ecosystem, which is very robust in Kenyan politics. The challenge I observe with Kenyan politics is just that, in as much as they've had these breakaway parties from the main party and have been able to form these coalitions periodically, is that they're not always grounded in ideology. They're not always grounded in a different vision. It is a lot of personality politics. So one of the challenges that exists in Kenya now is that they still have a personality-driven political model without some of the ideological pinnings that you need to make it more. But in terms of giving strength to the opposition framework, I think he did make a major contribution in that regard.
To Madagascar now, where coup leader there, Colonel Michael Randrianirina, was sworn in as president on Friday. There were cheers, there were trumpets, and this is days after he seized power, and our youth-led protests to get us to this point. Before this, former President Andre Rajoelina had fled the country, went abroad, and was impeached. condemned the takeover, and then he vowed that he won't step down. Do we know where he is, firstly? And what do you think the impact that Colonel Michael Randrianarina's takeover will have on the political landscape of Madagascar? These names are so difficult. These surnames in Madagascar, they're tongue twisters.
Yes,
yeah,
they are tongue twisters. So I think everyone must sympathize with us if they're listening from Madagascar. We don't have the proficiency of the tongue. So I think Andry Rajoelina, as far as I know, he was flown out to France. I think that's where he may still be at this particular moment. Stand to be corrected in respect to that factoid. But he was definitely trying to hold on to power by any means available to him, as we saw even during the protest, changing the prime minister. And even now, if he were to say, he's not going to step down, I think that the bus has already moved and he won't be able to really make a real claim to being the leader of the country anymore. This is how he came into power in 2009. There were protests, the military got involved, and then he eventually got placed into power and occupied the position that he was occupying. So as far as his remarks around, legitimacy or illegitimacy, it's neither here nor there, because the public, the people, and the National Assembly has determined a new direction for the country. And now looking at that new direction, looking at Colonel Randrianarina's, the new Colonel Michael who's come in. I've also mispronounced his name, apologies. But he's really going to have to show, number one, that he can create a pathway to an election that is within a reasonable timetable. Also to show that he's not going to necessarily try to form a new political party that will then, contest for power, like what we see often where you have constitutional amendments, then you have the person who orchestrated the coup ending up now being the democratically elected president, so that they sanitize the coup, so to speak. I think one of the challenges with this particular protest is that the Gen Z, and this is the challenge with leaderless movements, the Gen Z protesters were very clear on what they did not want. They did not want the water cuts, they did not want the electricity cuts, they didn't want the poverty, the high unemployment, the corruption. They were very clear on all of those things. And they didn't want, at some point, Andry Rajoelina, they didn't want him in office anymore. That much they were clear on. What they were not clear on is what is the substitute, or what is the alternative to everything that you don't want. And as a result of that, they created this easy opportunity for the military to come in with their leadership and say, okay, we support your protest. We're going to remove the guy who's currently in office, and our guy is going to come in. And the public, because they're so frustrated, have welcomed that. The danger in doing this is that you end up with a situation like what happened in Zimbabwe, where you remove Robert Mugabe and you substitute him with Emerson Mnangagwa. And if you were trying to make sure that you get closer to democracy, reduce corruption, that may not be necessarily the best way to do that, because as we've seen, Emerson Mnangagwa is pursuing a third term, or seems to be pursuing a third term. It seems to be another dynasty that is being formulated in the Zimbabwean political framework. But in 2017, 2018, we saw the people celebrating with the army that the army was helping them to remove Robert Mugabe, one of those soft coups that we saw in the SADC region. So this could be the situation. The challenges the country is facing are quite dire. As we've spoken about, high levels of poverty, it's 75%, very young population, and there are high levels of lack of delivery and high levels of corruption. Will the colonel be able to remove all of those features in the first year? We'll have to see. But more importantly, we'll also be looking at timetable towards election.
Another protest action that was spearheaded by Gen Zs was in Morocco. Young people took to the streets of Rabat on Saturday. So these Gen Z protests seem to be on the rise. The significance of them, what would you say it is? And can they really push the government to bring about the changes that young people are demanding?
Well, the Gen Z protests do seem to be on the rise. It almost reminds me of the Arab Spring, because people are seeing things in other countries, being inspired by them. I think they are rather significant. They may have some challenges in Morocco because Morocco is run by the royal family, and maybe there'll be some moderate changes here and there. But, when you're bumping into royal families and those type of forms of government, it becomes much more difficult to change the leadership and to get lasting reforms. And we saw that even with the Arab Springs, when it got to those types of countries where there were kings and monarchs, it was a bit harder. But overall, I think the significance of the Gen Z protests is that we have this young continent. We have in some other parts of the world a very young, young demographic in those countries, and young people are now saying they're going to do politics differently. They're not going to wait to go through the structures and systems. They're going to take it to the streets, and they're going to try to push for change in that way. And I think that's going to be the story of these Gen Z protests when we reflect on them.
Jamie, thank you so much. We always appreciate your insights, and have a great week ahead.
Thanks, and have a great week too.
That's our resident analyst, Mighty Jamie, giving us the roundup wrap in terms of stories that we can also expect to develop in this new week. It's 6:31 Central African time. Let's get our news headlines. Here's Onele Nsinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Zimbabwe's ruling ZANU-PF party plans to amend the constitution to extend President Emmerson Mnangagwa's term by 2 years to 2030, a move opposition politicians have condemned as unlawful. The proposal, adopted at a party conference over the weekend, would prolong the 83-year-old president's second five-year term, currently set to end in 2028. 3 witnesses are expected to testify before the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry in Pretoria, South Africa this week. Proceedings will be partially heard in camera from today to Wednesday. And Israel has indicated that it is pausing attacks against Hamas. This follows the worst day of violence in Gaza since the ceasefire began. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nsinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
It's time to find out what's been happening in the world of sport, and I'm going to be listening all day today to Manchester United beating Liverpool. Good morning, Musubudi Mankur.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you so much, Peter. Very good morning from the sports desk. We'll start with this story. So Yassir Zabri struck twice in a space of 17 first-half minutes as Morocco lifted the FIFA Under-20 World Cup with a 2-0 victory over Argentina in Santiago on Sunday. So that was last night. So Morocco became only the second African side to win the competition after Ghana back in 2009 and are the first team to beat Argentina in an Under-20 World Cup final in 42 years. So man of the match, Zabri, opened the scoring on 12 minutes before doubling the lead for Mohamed Ohabi's men in the 29th minute. Morocco never looking back at the rest of the way. So 6-time champions Argentina had been the overwhelming favourites, having won all 6 of their games leading to Sunday's showpiece with 15 goals and 2 against. Now, but it was not meant to be on the evening for the Argentina side, who had not lost in an Under-20 World Cup decider since Mexico 1983 to arch rivals Brazil. Meanwhile, Otmani Mamani was named the player of the tournament, while the hero on the day, Yassir Zabri, took the silver ball as the competition's second best player. The Atlas Lions Cubs have now written their names in gold, inspiring a new generation across Africa and beyond. Well, Peter, this one is for you. Liverpool slumped to a 4th consecutive defeat for the very first time in 11 years as Manchester United won 2-0 last night to end their near-decade-long wait for a victory at Anfield. Now, Harry Maguire's 84th minute header secured back-to-back Premier League wins for the very first time in Ruben Amorim's tenure as United boss. So 12 minutes from time, Cody Gakpo had cancelled out Brian Mbeumo's opener after just 61 seconds. Defeat now leaves Liverpool 4 points adrift of Arsenal at the top of the table, and Arne Slot still searching for answers and how to get the right blend after splashing out nearly $600 million on new players in the transfer market. Let's hear from the winning coach, Ruben Amorim.
Yeah, I think so. It doesn't mean a lot. It means today, but tomorrow is not going to mean a lot. It's 3 points. but it's a good victory. I will do the same thing that I did in the last games, is try to see the game, try to, in key points we had some luck, but we fought for every ball. We lost our composure a little bit in the second half.
On to hockey news now. The South African women's hockey side reaffirmed their continental dominance with a 4-0 victory over Ghana in the final of the 2025 Africa Hockey Cup of Nations tournament in Ismailia, Egypt over the weekend, claiming their 8th title. So while when the final whistle blew, it signalled yet another golden chapter in South African hockey history, an 8th successive African crown, as well as a 6th consecutive final triumph over Ghana, underlining the team's enduring excellence on the continental stage. So the victory also confirms South Africa's place at the 2026 FIH Hockey World Cup, as they now continue to fly the flag proudly for African hockey on the global stage. Meanwhile, the South African men's hockey team also produced a performance for the ages to defeat Egypt 5-1 in the final of the 2025 Africa Cup of Nations tournament, also in Ismailia, claiming their 8th continental title and also booking their place in the 2026 FIH Hockey World Cup. It was the 7th consecutive AFCON final between the two African giants, who had played out to a 3-3 draw during the group stages earlier. This time around, though, it was the South Africans who left no doubt about their supremacy, combining composure, structure, as well as brilliance in front of goal, to secure the biggest winning margin ever recorded in an AFCON final. And finally, in hockey news, tennis news, a resurgent Daniil Medvedev claimed his first title for 882 days with a victory over Corentin Moutet in the Almaty Open final. Now, the Russian former world number 1 had a torrid year, winning just one match at a Grand Slams, as also suffering a meltdown at the US Open just a few months back. Medvedev's inconsistency also on the ATP Tour and struggles with his serve in particular led to him dropping outside of the top 10 and ultimately splitting with his longtime coach Geles Ksereniva. Now, working with Thomas Jonasson as well as Rohan Gotsia, Medvedev had steadily improved in the past month, culminating in a hard-fought 7-5, 4-6, 6-3 victory over the Frenchman Moutet. It is also Medvedev's first title since 2023 at the Rome Masters and his first on the hard court since March of that year. Victory also means Medvedev has now won 21 titles at 21 different tournaments. It's 6:38 a.m. Central African Time. It concludes your first sporting update of the morning. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, our email address is newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11714 59. I'm back with more sports news in the next hour. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Mosibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Siyabangena manje. Vito Jabulani Kolele iMagoda. Jabulani is a young man from Giyani in Limpopo in South Africa. Very easy guy, taking things easy. To know me is to know that I love what I do, which I'm crazy about it. So when you hear me on radio, expect the best. Expect great music. Expect great content. Expect 180 minutes of nothing but fun. You'll find me on the morning reset, 3 to 6 a.m., Monday to Friday. Siyabangena baba. Ay. Mbuleke.
Let's now check in with the world of business for the first time on this 20th of October, on Monday. Here's Buntle Headbush to give us those details.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thanks, Asanda, and a very good morning to our listeners. In our top business story this Monday morning, Morocco says it will allocate $15 billion to health and education in 2026. This is up 16% from last year. According to a statement from Morocco's royal palace, the decision to allocate this higher amount to these two sectors in the 2026 budget comes amid a sensitive social context marked by the resurgence of youth-led demonstrations in the country calling better public services. In addition to spending on these sectors, the government plans to create over 27,000 new jobs in the sectors. Libya's Wetina Oil Company has announced the repair of a leak of a pipeline to transport crude in the Al Jafra area. The company stated that its maintenance team managed to contain the leak on its 20-inch line. It says the team repaired the leak without recording any environmental impact or damage to nearby agricultural areas. South African Electricity Minister Ndoro Ramakgopa says the country is pursuing a diversified energy mix, which includes coal, nuclear and hydro. Ramakgopa has emphasized that this approach would help stabilize the country's energy supply and attract more investment as businesses suffer the most during load shedding and power outages. He was presenting South Africa's integrated resource plan, calling it the biggest post-apartheid investment the country has made. Ramakgopa addressed the media in Pretoria on the vision for 2030 and beyond.
We want to achieve a security of electricity supply. We want to talk of load shedding in past tense. We want to ensure that when the President and Cabinet says we want to grow the economy by 3 percentage points, that in fact we've got sufficient supply to support that growth. And that supply must be available now so that growth can follow. The economy doesn't grow and supply comes later. So this security of supply is such that even if we've got multiple units failures, whether on the Eskom side, on the private sector side, we must still have sufficient electricity for the economy to continue to operate. We don't subject our people to darkness.
South Africa's Democratic Alliance Party says there's been an astronomical increase in the water tanker expenditure by the city of Tshwane. The DA blames the African National Congress, the Economic Freedom Fighters, Action SA coalition over the city. DA Tshwane mayoral candidate Celia Brink says spending increased from just over $8 million to $10 million.
I've already written to Tshwane City Manager Johan Mettler to launch an investigation into this extraordinary unauthorized expenditure, and the DA will also be reporting the matter to the Public Protector.
China has accused the US of a cyber attack on a center that regulates its standard time. It warned that the serious breaches could have disrupted communication networks, financial systems and the power supply. The BBC's Bernadette Kihwe has the details.
Beijing has alleged that the US National Security Agency has been stealing secrets and infiltrating China's National Time Center, saying it found evidence tracing stolen data and credentials as far back as 2022. It said the US had exploited a vulnerability in the messaging service of a foreign brand smartphone to spy on the devices of several staff as well as computer systems. The National Time Center is a research institute that generates, maintains and broadcasts China's standard time.
Now let's take our first look at the indicators this morning. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,468 naira this morning. In Botswana, it's 13 pula 25. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 39. And in Zambia, it's 22 kwacha 71. Moving to the BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 real 40. Russia, 81 rubles 11. In India, it's 87 rupees 98. China, 7 yuan 12, and South Africa, $1 is trading at 17 rand 34 cents this morning, down a bit from Friday. $1 is trading at 74 pence to the British pound and 85 to the euro. Looking at commodities, gold is trading at $4,261 per ounce, platinum at $1,600 per ounce, while the price of Brent crude oil is at $61.09 a barrel. And those are your business news. I'll be back with another bulletin in the next hour. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Buntle Headbush.
business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective. G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa.
Now, you want to do the G20 fact of the day, because it's a really interesting one, I believe.
All right,
Asanda.
our G20 fact for this Monday is, although South Africa is the only single African member of the G20, an African leader actually chaired one of the G20 working groups long before the continent had any formal representation. In 2003, 5 years before the First Leaders Summit, South African Finance Minister Trevor Manuel co-chaired the G20 working group on IMF reform with his Canadian counterpart. That group's recommendations helped shape how the IMF responded to the 2008 financial crisis. And that's our G20 fact this morning at 6:45 Central African Time it is.
G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa, championing Africa through solidarity, equality, and sustainability. Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time, only on Channel Africa.
Now, with the 2025 World Bank IMF annual meetings now behind us, several outcomes stand out. The G20's reaffirmed, if cautiously, debt declaration, stronger calls for credit rating reform, and warnings from the IMF about rising domestic borrowing risks in sub-Saharan Africa. Well, to reflect on what really shifted or perhaps didn't during the meetings and revisit his case for the national development banks, maybe one of Africa's best tools to reclaim sovereign development space and break cycles of debt dependency, I spoke to Brian Kagoro, who's the Managing Director of Programs at the Open Society Foundations, and I asked him if the meetings brought any real changes for Africa.
Well, yes and no. I think what has changed is that there's a collective consciousness amongst Africans that the solutions will not come entirely from the development finance institutions. But number two, that they need to speak with one voice. I mean, if you look at the figures, they're staggering. The figures that you referred to, debt relief is at under 7%. When you look at the progress, look at recent data. If you look at external debt service, has more than doubled, reaching 2% of GDP. In some countries, it's over 60% of GDP. In many low-income countries, interest payments alone absorb 15% of revenues. So I think that the fact that Africa is speaking with one voice is good. And Africa has placed on the table conversations about the cost of capital as well. Because part of the reason why this debt remains a problem is that we borrow at unbelievably high rates. Our risk profile is unduly elevated.
Talk to me a little bit more about the national development banks. There are not too many of them on the continent. And with the resources that we have, why is that? And who should be funding them?
You know, historically, we've always... Ali Mazrui described the problem of the Congo 3 decades ago as a problem not of a scarcity, but a problem of excess. Africa always had raw materials and all sorts of things to export. Now, as a result, even when Africa came up with institutions, the African Monetary Fund and et cetera, Africa did not take itself seriously enough to begin investing. So this is an age-old problem, that we come up with brilliant ideas and we expect the same people we want to become independent from economically to finance these ideas. What it will take is African countries committing. There are two pathways that are the national development banks require both fiscal and monetary discipline. We have to deal with the governance issues because It's possible in each of our countries to build a significant amount of reserves, a significant amount of capital. What often happens is the political exigencies, greed, and other factors you end up politicizing those institutions. So if you don't cushion them from that political encroachment, and sometimes they're set up by one regime, when you have a change in an election, because of political reasons, they're undermined. This continuity of policy, this continuity of vision is important, is even as Africa navigates these democratic changes or forms of changes that happen. So the number one issue is not scarcity. The number one problem is one of discipline, of vision, and commitment. And that's the same for regional development banks. They need to be capitalized. If you look at the amounts of money that we spend on confetti, amount of money that we spend on things that the wastage only, I'm not even talking about corruption. These would go a long way in capitalizing regional development banks, but it also means ceding a bit of sovereignty. That's where we've had a problem. Our country wants sovereign poverty with respect to each other. I can understand how you assert sovereignty against external forces, but within the context of the African Union, where you now have the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, you now have other policies and norms that are moving you towards a continental economic zone. It is important that we understand that the speed at which we begin to cede sovereignty, to standardize, and to ensure we have the best people running these institutions has to be quicker. The second is sovereign wealth funds. Many of our countries have set up funds. The sovereign wealth funds enable us to think in an intergenerational way. At the moment, most of our countries, kids that are not yet born are already in debt, the debt crisis that we're talking about earlier. Sovereign wealth funds will enable us to address three things. Nobody has the appetite to address our social challenges. We cannot ignore our social challenges because they morph into political crisis, whether it's demonstrations, mass uprising. We cannot ignore our social crisis because they erode any notion of economic growth. So sovereign wealth funds address the social question. But number two, our growth will not entirely be financed by foreign direct investment. In fact, there's very little evidence that foreign direct investment alone can drive the sort of transformative growth that you need for countries to industrialize and to leapfrog those that depend on it. So sovereign wealth funds would be key if we're disciplined enough. They'll be key to address the growth, the intergenerational question and the growth rate. But the third thing, economic stability. Half the time we're going out to look for 100 million, 200 million as stabilization money. And in countries that are so rich in natural resources, so rich in tourism potential, so rich in their capacity and ability to offer services. So it seems to me that the visions are there at the African Union level, at the SADC level. The conception of what needs to be done does exist. What's now needed is leadership that goes beyond politics. We've placed too high a premium on political leadership. We have not sufficiently placed the premium on economic and social leadership to enable us to bring the economic imperatives and the political imperatives together. Because mostly people who make it into politics are not always necessarily economically literate. And people who are in economic endeavors don't necessarily always know how to navigate the politics. We're at a moment now on the continent where politicking alone is not going to save us from political instability, from insecurity, from economic instability and penury.
All right, perhaps to really sort of bring it down to ordinary people. Kofi is watching in Accra. We have Farai in Harare, Jabu in Johannesburg, maybe Fernando in Angola. What does this past week, the annual meetings, and this whole question of debt that we've been talking about actually mean to the ordinary man in the street? Why should we be paying attention and perhaps even bringing our heads of state and governments to account?
You don't have medicines, ambulances. The roads are not fixed. the quality of education has not improved since your parents went to school. The infrastructure, the ability to keep the civil service best staffed, well staffed, has diminished significantly. Water in most of our cities has become either poor quality or scarce. Electricity with power outages are now a common thing. In part, if you look at how much it would cost to fix these problems and say, where is the money going? So you discount the corruption, you realize that our countries are paying in terms of debt servicing, sometimes just the interest alone, more than they are spending on these fundamental issues. So if citizens don't have clean drinking water, they are likely to suffer from health-related problems. Now, once our hospitals now are treating people who are not victims of disease necessarily, but who are victims of this debt alcoholism, it essentially means we will borrow money in order to shore up the health services to try and deal with people who are in the health facilities in the first place, because the money we could have spent improving our water reticulation system, our sewer reticulation system, the money we could have spent on improving our housing, low to middle income housing, is being spent servicing debts. And what are these debts for? These are debts sometimes for white elephant projects. And why is it important to hold our leaders to account? We've seen in some countries, a country like Senegal discovered hidden debt. That means governments borrow. The system of accountability and transparency and accountability to democratic institutions such as parliament and other bodies is nominal. So you hear that your head of state has gone to country Y. They have signed certain agreements, billions of dollars that will not be paid by that head of state, but that will be paid by you, the taxpayer, the worker, that will be paid by your children and great-grandchildren are procured. Some of them are spent corruptly. Some of them are spent on things that don't create jobs, things that don't create new institutions, that don't repair institutions that are much needed. So what we see as a public service strike in Johannesburg, what we see as a market women strike in Accra, what we see as unhappiness in Malawi amongst the youth often translates to the wealth of the continent that is systematically, constantly, repeatedly given away, because the prudence at a domestic level to govern how we borrow and what we borrow for, and from whom we borrow, by the way, because a lot of our debt now is commercial, which means we're using short-term instruments, high interest, in order to finance infrastructure, which has a low return in the short term. But Africa also needs to come together and operate as one. To give those listeners something to think about, the entire African economy, right, is smaller than the value of Tesla, right, or is smaller than the value of, let's say, California as an economy. So sometimes we compete amongst ourselves and with each other. But if we came together, the African economy could quadruple in many respects. We would develop regional value chains, we would develop centers of excellence, we would negotiate better across the board and get better deals. So this is what it means for the ordinary person, that African unification, Pan-Africanism, regional integration is not a luxury. The nationalism that says we're exceptional because we're Zimbabwe, we're Kenya, we're Ghana, is an exceptionalism of ignorance. No island of excellence will save us from the scourge that we face in this time, when there's militarization of the economy globally, there's digitalization of the economy globally, there's financialization of the economy globally. What does it mean? We can ride in an Uber, we can shop on Amazon. The money earned for most of our countries is not coming into our state coffers. It's going straight to enrich another country elsewhere. So the range of things around tax justice, debt justice, climate justice that we all have to be fighting for are broad, they are wide, and unity is the only answer.
That was Brian Kagoro, Managing Director of Programs at the Open Society Foundation.
It is 7 o'clock Central African time. A very good morning to you and welcome to Rise and Shine. If you've just joined us, we enter the second hour of the show. This is Channel Africa. We're broadcasting live from our Johannesburg studios in South Africa from the African perspective. We come to you. We've got another hour to go after this hour. We are together until 9 this morning. My name is Asanda, Beda.
And I'm Peter Ndoro. Yeah, next half an hour, what will we be looking at? Well, Zimbabwe, interesting. Emerson Mnangagwa seems to be pushing for a third term. He's been denying it all along, but he's getting all his people underneath him to push for that to 2030 at least, which is extending his current rule by 2 years. We'll see what's playing out. They had their annual People's Meeting conference last week. And also Madagascar has a new head of state, and that's somebody who was involved in coups, several coup attempts in previous years, and now he's head of state. We're unpacking all of that and other stories after the news with Onelen Sinsi and the sports headlines with Musibudi Makura.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Zimbabwe's ruling ZANU-PF party plans to amend the constitution in order to extend President Emerson Mnangagwa's term by 2 years to 2030, a move opposition politicians have condemned as unlawful. The proposal adopted at a party conference over the weekend would prolong the 83-year-old president's second five-year term, currently set to end in 2028. The resolution comes amid a succession battle within ZANU-PF, where Mnangagwa's main internal rival, former Army General Constantino Chiwenga, has been accused of treasonous acts. Channel Africa correspondent in Harare, Zimbabwe, John Kasim reports.
While the announcement did not come as a surprise, it changes the country's political story, as this will be the first time such a move has been done. Last year, at another conference in Bulawayo, a bold reaffirmation was made for the constitution to be amended and allow Mnangagwa to rule until 2030. Since then, fierce fights have emerged in the ruling ZANU-PF between two factions, that of Mnangagwa and Chiwenga.
3 witnesses are expected to testify before the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry in Pretoria, South Africa this week. Proceedings will be partially heard in camera from today to Wednesday. Their witnesses' testimonies are expected to be in relation to their experiences as detectives investigating criminal cartels. Sibahle Mota reports.
Proceedings are expected to continue this week in line with the ruling handed down by Chairperson Justice Mbuyiseli Madlanga last week. Justice Madlanga ruled that witnesses this week will testify via audio in a remote location. This is also in line with an agreement reached between media houses Daily Maverick and Media 24 and the Commission's evidence leaders. Last week, Witness X, who was testifying remotely through an intermediary, encountered technical challenges which are believed to have threatened their life.
Officials from the Zimbabwe and Malawi High Commissions and the Limpopo Provincial Government in South Africa are today expected to meet with the families of the 43 people killed in a bus crash outside Lothrichard more than a week ago. The bus was carrying over 90 people. It crashed on the N1 on its way from Gqeberha in the Eastern Cape province to Malawi through Zimbabwe. The Limpopo Premier spokesperson Chirivali Muava says the aim is to support the bereaved families as they identify the bodies of their loved ones.
So these meetings marks the next phase in the identification process following the completion of the post-mortem examination conducted by the Forensic Pathology Services. The South African Police Service Victim Identification Center has also commenced scientific identification procedures, including the DNA analysis and the fingerprints matching in partnership with authorities from Zimbabwe as well as Malawi. So the Limpopo provincial government continues to offer psychological support services to affected families, including trauma counseling.
Madagascar's military leader, Colonel Michael Randrianarina, has promised to grow the country's economy and instill change. He has been sworn in as president days after taking control of the island nation in the wake of youth-led protests that forced out his predecessor, Andre Rajoelina. However, the African Union and the United Nations have condemned the coup. SADC has since deployed a fact-finding mission led by Malawi's former president, Joyce Banda. Colonel Randrianarina says a new chapter is being opened for the country.
We place good governance, a culture of transparency, accountability, efficiency, and the principle of zero tolerance at the center of our actions. We also commit to taking all necessary actions and measures against the enemies of our republic to redress the wrongs suffered by the victims during the popular movement and to guarantee the free exercise of fundamental rights and freedoms, including freedom of expression and respect for the law.
Lastly, Israel has indicated that it's pausing attacks against Hamas. This follows the worst day of violence in Gaza since the ceasefire began. The BBC's Frank Gardner reports.
Dozens of Palestinians and 2 Israeli soldiers were killed as both sides, Israel and Hamas, blamed the other for violating the ceasefire. Israeli warplanes have once more been in action, sending up plumes of smoke as they targeted Hamas in retaliation, Israel says, for firing on an Israeli military position. Hamas, which has yet to give up its weapons, is accusing Israel of arming a criminal gang of looters that it says is operating with impunity in the Israeli-controlled half of the Gaza Strip.
Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nsinsi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, South African champions Mamelodi Sundowns whitewashed Nigerian champions Remo Stars 5-1, while Elina Rybakina rallied from a set-down to beat Russian fourth seed Ekaterina Alexandrova to win the Nickbo Open. Details coming up at 7:30.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
Zimbabwe's President Emmerson Mnangagwa's bid to extend his ruling tenure up to 2030 has been sealed by the just-ended ZANU-PF conference held in Mutare over the weekend. Mnangagwa has denied having ambitions to extend his rule by another 2 years, saying he is a constitutionalist, but all that has been exposed as theatricals. However, the resolution means his deputy, General Constantino Chiwenga, may not be able to take over from Mnangagwa in 2028. John Kasim, our correspondent based in Harare, Zimbabwe, filed this report.
Loud cheers, ululations, singing and dancing made the announcement that President Mnangagwa's term in office was being extended to 2030. Minister of Justice Ziyambi made the announcement Saturday as the ruling ZANU-PF was concluding its 22nd National Conference held in Mutare over the weekend. This marked the end of bickering, murmur and uncertainty within the ruling party as the fight for the presidency had reached the climax, with Vice President Constantino Chiwenga showing interest. While the announcement did not come as a surprise, it changes the country's political story, as this will be the first time such a move has been done. Last year, at another conference in Bulawayo, a bold reaffirmation was made for the constitution to be amended and allow Mnangagwa to rule until 2030. Since then, fierce fights have emerged in the ruling ZANU-PF between two factions, that of Mnangagwa and Chiwenga. As it stands, Chiwenga and his supporters appear to have lost, hence comments by the likes of Chris Muchangwa, aka Mnangagwa Ali, urging the Vice President to accept the conference resolution.
Look, ZANU-PF is a democratic party. If people want to contest for the president, they will be free to do so, because it's a democratic party. But it also means that if you lose, you also must comply with the wishes of the majority, because so you go and test your capacity, to get support from the grassroots of ZANU-PF. It's one's choice. We don't foreclose anybody from taking part, but you've got to be active in rank and file membership of ZANU-PF, because it's a mass party.
The constitution does not allow for the sitting president to rule beyond 2 terms, and a constitutional amendment will have to be made. Already, the resolution has asked the Minister of Justice to begin work that will see that the extension has been done legally. Maybe this is what President Mnangagwa referred to as the constitutionalism, even though the Constitution says otherwise. Owing to his 2030 agenda, the one party was almost disintegrating into two, with both factions exchanging harsh words on social media. Ordinary Zimbabweans feel Chiwenga must be given a chance, as is anti-corruption, a cancer that eroded Zimbabwe's capacity to take care of its poor citizens. Here's Mnangagwa addressing the conference in a manner that sounded like mocking Chiwenga and his supporters.
We are running our own race, and no one, including outsiders, should dictate anything to us. We are ourselves. ZANU-PF is alive, vibrant and strong. ZANU-PF is the only organized, tried and tested custodian of our revolution, and remains focused on bettering the people's quality of life.
For Channel Africa News in Harare, Zimbabwe, this is John Kassim.
Mix Vibration sur Channel Africa.
Qu'est-ce qui vous a amené à dire ça? Est-ce que vous avez observé un certain nombre d'événements dans la vie? Est-ce que c'était par rapport à une expérience? Est-ce que vous avez rencontré des choses qui vous ont dit il faut de la patience, comme ça les choses vont venir au bon moment et le bon Dieu pourra peut-être me visiter?
Oui, c'était justement un conseil que le Seigneur m'a fait inspirer pour donner à son peuple, parce qu'il y a la plupart des gens, pendant que Dieu bénit les autres, ils pensent que Dieu les a oubliés, et pendant que Dieu ouvre pour les autres, ils pensent que peut-être Dieu n'a pas pu écouter leurs prières. Alors, ce n'est pas le cas. Alors, Dieu bénit tout un chacun de nous avec son temps. Donc, le temps de Dieu est toujours le meilleur dans la vie de tout un chacun de nous.
Mix Vibration, tous les dimanches de 18h à 19h, temps universel.
From Cape to Cairo, Dakar to Dar es Salaam, rise and shine with Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda on Channel Africa.
On that Zimbabwe story, we'll continue in terms of the coverage of that, getting a response or views being shared on Mnangagwa's term extension bid and what that means for the country of Zimbabwe, what it means for the democracy there. We'll be speaking to an opposition leader, Job Sikala, who's also a veteran Zimbabwe pro-democracy struggle figure and former member of parliament.
Yep, that's all after 8 o'clock. Right now, though, let's focus on the island nation of Madagascar, where military ruler Colonel Michael Randrianarina has promised to install change and grow the country's economy. He was sworn in as the president last Friday, and the swearing-in ceremony came after the Constitutional Court upheld the impeachment vote of former President Andrej Rajoelina, who fled the country earlier in the week. The African Union, the United Nations, as well as SADC have condemned the military coup. Wonolo Maribe filed this report.
This marks a historic turning point for our country. With the people in turmoil, Driven by the desire for change and a deep love for their homeland, we joyfully open a new chapter in our national life.
Madagascar's military leader, Colonel Michael Randrianarina, was sworn in as president following days after taking control of the island nation in the wake of youth-led protests that forced out his predecessor, Audrey Rajoelina. Randrianarina says that a new chapter is being opened in the island nation, adding that he is committed to instilling change.
We place good governance, a culture of transparency, accountability, efficiency, and the principle of zero tolerance at the center of our actions. We also commit to taking all necessary actions and measures against the enemies of our republic to redress the wrongs suffered by the victims during the popular movement and to guarantee the free exercise of fundamental rights and freedoms, including freedom of expression and respect for the law.
However, the African Union and the United Nations have condemned the coup, with UN spokesperson Stefan Dujarric calling for the return to constitutional order.
The Secretary General condemns the unconstitutional change of government power in Madagascar and calls for the return to constitutional order and the rule of law. He takes note of the decision taken by the Peace and Security Committee of the African Union to immediately suspend the country from participation in all activities of the African Union, its organs and institutions, until constitutional order is restored in the country. The Secretary General encourages all Malagasy stakeholders, including the youth, to work together to address the underlying causes of instability in Madagascar.
Dr. Frank Legaba, senior lecturer and political analyst at Wits School of Governance, says that the military's intervention has further complicated the situation, with AU's recent suspension risking isolation of Madagascar's new leadership.
If you don't manage the transition very well, you run a risk of losing investors, you run a risk of worsening, deteriorating the situation, of rebuilding the country and all of that. So I'm skeptical, but I'm looking keenly to look at what follows in terms of the protest now and the rebuilding of a new government, what follows. Then from there, I think I may have a little bit of optimism looking at what the new government will do.
Meanwhile, SADC has taken a decision to deploy a team comprising Organ Troika member states to undertake a fact-finding mission to Madagascar. The bloc is expecting a report in 2 weeks' time and will convene an extraordinary Organ Troika summit immediately thereafter to deliberate on a mission report concerning the political and security situation in the country. Bonolo Maribe, SBC News.
South Africa's Deputy Minister of Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities, Mapaseka Emily Letsike, says the empowerment of girls and ensuring their rights is not only a moral imperative, but also a catalyst for sustainable development. She was speaking at an event to commemorate the International Day of the Girl Child in Johannesburg. The United Nations General Assembly declared October 11 as the day to recognize girls' rights and the unique challenges girls face around the world. Ntlanhla Mahlangu has more.
The International Day of the Girl Child focuses attention on the need to address the challenges girls face to promote girls' empowerment and the fulfillment of their human rights. The commemoration event held at Midrand High School in Johannesburg featured motivational talks, panel discussions, and learner voices under the theme, "The Girl I Am, the Change I Lead." DOVE, the Department of Basic Education, and the Development Bank of Southern Africa united to empower girls across South Africa, marking the day with the Change the Complement campaign. Deputy Minister of Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities, Mapaseka Steve Emily Letsike, says the International Day of the Girl Child is a reminder that the destiny of the nation is tied to the destiny of every child in it.
A nation that fails its girls, it fails its future. But a nation that invests in them, educationally, economically, and emotionally, builds an unbreakable strength. So to our girls and learners who are here today, let me say this. You are not leaders of tomorrow. You are leaders of today. The world is already being shaped by your voice, your courage, your refusal to be silent. You are the heartbeat of this democracy. Your worth is not up for negotiation. When society tells you that you cannot, tell it that you are already.
The Change the Compliment campaign, launched on International Day of the Girl Child, challenged the norm of appearance-based praise. Instead, it urged South Africans to broaden the way girls are complimented, empowering them with a recognition for courage, creativity, intelligence, and achievements. Unilever Head of Beauty, Wellness and Personal Care in Southern Africa, Palva Sessions, says the campaign urges all South Africans to celebrate girls for who they are and for what they do, not just how they look.
Our goal with this movement is twofold. Firstly, we want to inspire a behavior shift in how we compliment girls. And secondly, we want to help people reflect. What happens in the gap between what was said but what was actually heard?
Dr. Andy Lingube from UNICEF says every girl deserves to be protected and empowered.
For us as the UN, it's a human rights issue. It's a child's right issue. And I think when we're engaging in these interventions and we're talking about girls and talking about boys, we must remember we are talking about the rights of a child. Globally, about 133 million girls are out of school for different reasons. In South Africa, it is mostly associated with teenage pregnancy, and there's enough evidence around that. And we found that evidence is showing us that if we do not have this conversation as communities and as with girls and with boys, we are likely to lose even more girls.
The 2025 International Day of the Girl Child celebration served as a rallying point for renewed commitment to invest in girls' education, leadership, and protection. It also reinforced the message that girls are not just waiting for the future, but they are shaping it now. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Ntanta Mahlangu in Johannesburg.
Now, the third and final G20 Environmental and Climate Sustainability Working Group ministerial meeting hosted by South Africa concluded on Friday, the 17th of October in Cape Town. In an historic outcome, countries reached consensus on three key documents, 2 ministerial declarations and one chair's summary, a first for the G20 environmental track. The meeting, which nearly stalled after Russia raised last-minute concerns, ended on a positive note, though, with all nations agreeing to the final text. Channel Africa's Lebahang Mabange attended the final day of the meeting and filed this report.
The week-long meeting brought together ministers and representatives from G20 member states to strengthen global cooperation on environmental protection and climate action. South Africa's Minister of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment, Dr. Deon George, described the meeting as a major success.
It was a very successful meeting, given the very complex world that we're in at the moment. We issued 2 ministerial declarations, which is an unusual thing to do. One of the ministerial declarations, which is the Cape Town Ministerial Declaration on Air Quality, and that focuses specifically on work that needs to be done together to make sure that the air that people breathe is clean air. Then we have the Cape Town Declaration on environmental crimes.
Dr. George also explained the significance of the third document, which captured areas where countries could not fully agree.
I did issue a chairman's statement, a summary basically, and those were on a number of items where there was not full agreement. Right. Obviously, we know that with the withdrawal of the United States from the Paris Agreement, that does bring in an element of complexity because we are talking about climate and sustainability, etc., and there are very strong views on that. So we have to be respectful of that fact because it is a multilateral environment where you need to have full consensus. So we have to bear those in mind. And when you're working with a number of countries, especially the richest countries in the world really, that they do have very strong positions, and it's difficult actually sometimes to coalesce them.
Despite some tense moments, particularly towards the end when Russia voiced its concerns, consensus was eventually reached. Speaking after the conclusion, Anna Melkina, head of G20 and Bilateral Climate Cooperation Division at the Russian Ministry of Economic Development, welcomed the compromise reached by all countries.
I think we've had very intense discussions for the past several days. Unfortunately, we couldn't reach consensus on all the matters, but they were all included in the chair's summary, which reflects different views and all the topics we have discussed upon, which is really good. As for the two ministerial declarations, I would say it's very unusual for G20 to have separate ministerial declarations on different topics, but they are all consensus-based texts, and we're very happy that there is something we can share with this world, that we can agree upon something, and hopefully this will lay foundation for discussions G20 for next year.
From Indonesia, Vice Minister of Environment Dian Faisal Malik Hendro Priyono praised the outcomes, saying while the process was challenging, progress was made.
Those three outcomes, although they're not ideal, but I guess it amounts to something rather than having to go here from Indonesia about 20 hours away and going home without nothing. So at least there are things that we can agree on. And also, initially I thought we're not even able to get anything on the ministerial declarations, because initially the U.S. already pushed for a chair summary only.
He added that Indonesia valued the inclusivity of the process, even though not all their proposals were reflected in the final text.
Again, we already given our inputs to the conventions, to the meeting, and we appreciate although some of the inputs or many of the inputs were not incorporated into the ministerial declaration, but we are thankful for the fact that were even given the opportunity to voice our opinions. But some inputs were in fact integrated or also.
The conclusion of the meeting marks a milestone for South Africa's G20 presidency, with the Cape Town declarations setting the tone for continued global collaboration on air quality and combating environmental crimes, laying a foundation for next year's discussions under the next G20 host nation. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Lebogang Mabange in Cape Town, South Africa.
Organizers of the Sanlam Cape Town Marathon in South Africa have expressed their devastation following the cancellation of the premier road running event. The race was called off on Sunday morning due to bad weather. Strong winds had caused major damage to the race infrastructure. About 24,000 runners had registered to take part in the marathon. Amahle Dutoy reports.
Thousands of runners were left disappointed after the Cape Town Marathon was called off just moments before it was due to begin. The cancellation was announced with many runners already at the venue, with others still on their way. Some say the decision was disheartening after months of preparation.
I spent a lot of money to prepare the marathon, such as booking for accommodation, flight from Polokwane to Cape Town, and other running needs. I also took leave from my work. What a disappointed to hear this news.
I can't express my disappointment. This was going to be my first Sanlam Cape Town Marathon. When I saw the information, I initially thought it's fake news. I've traveled more than 1,500 kilometers from Polokwane in Limpopo, and I can't run. I'm hurt.
Organizers of the Cape Town Marathon say after safety assessments with all the relevant agencies, the decision was made to call the race off. The authorities had to prioritize public safety, says the Cape Town Marathon CEO Clark Gardner.
We had tents blown over, we had a medical tent beam fall down, and the road furniture in Woodstock and Salt River was all over the road and prevented contraflows and just didn't make it safe for our participants, for our volunteers, and for our staff. So we really, really are sad and sorry, but again, so beautiful to see the runners on the forecourt now singing, dancing, just showing all the resilience and love that we expect from South Africans. So thank you for all your support, thank you for understanding, and yes, we'll be back in 2026.
Gardner says the race has a no refunds policy, but will look into some measures which will be communicated further via social media. Next year's race has been moved from October to the 24th of May 2026. I'm Amahle Dutoy, SABC News in Cape Town.
That's really
it makes,
sad, eh?
Yeah, but it makes sense also for them to move the date of the. Don't do it at this time of the year. You know what the weather's going to be like in Cape Town, kind of thing.
But I think, I mean, I was looking it up to see if it's ever been cancelled before, and there were disruptions 2020, other editions 2007, 2019, 21, 24. They all went ahead as scheduled despite the inclement weather. They just reduced rerouted and made some adjustments. So this one was the first one, I think, technically cancelled ever. So it must have been really, really bad that there was no plan B. But I've seen the winds there, hey? I mean, it's if you've been to Cape Town, you know what it can be like. And I don't know whether there's any time of the year, actually, that you can
I think May is much better.
Yeah.
The weather in May is much better in Cape Town. But anyway, sorry to everybody who was so excited to get involved in that and have lost now financially as well. But you'd rather save lives and rather lose the money, and next day it will happen. 7:30 Central African Time. Let's get our news headlines. Here's Oned Nsins.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Zimbabwe's ruling ZANU-PF party plans to amend the constitution to extend President Emmerson Mnangagwa's term by 2 years to 2030, a move opposition politicians have condemned as unlawful. The proposal, adopted at a party conference over the weekend, would prolong the 83-year-old president's second five-year term, currently set to end in 2028. Officials from the Zimbabwe and Malawi High Commissions and the Limpopo provincial government in South Africa are today expected to meet with the families of the 43 people killed in a bus crash more than a week ago. The bus crashed on the N1 on its way from Gqeberha in the Eastern Cape province to Malawi through Zimbabwe. And polls have opened in Bolivia's presidential runoff. The election could signal an overhaul of economic policies. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Ntsinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Yeah, it was a busy sporting weekend for sure, and watching all of it for us and making sense of it, we say good morning to Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you so much, Peter. Very good morning once again from the sports desk. So South African champions Mamelodi Sundowns started their CAF Champions League campaign with a dominant display against Nigerian champions Remo Stars in the second preliminary round encounter on Sunday. So although the Premier Soccer League heavyweights were playing away from home, they shone and dispatched their rivals and are now almost certain of reaching the group stages. Sundowns coach Migaga Doso was pleased with that 5-1 result away from home.
But this was another story to be written on this first match. My impression is that we took it very serious, that we related with the need that we had to make an approach tactically very clear, considering the study we had from Remo Stars. And it's curious because exactly the first goal we scored is one space that we knew that we could use to find a free player to kick. And not easy to play against a team that has a lot of man-to-man marking in all over the pitch. We had to find the pass breakthrough a lot of times, so find the third man so that we could find a free player.
Now, Liverpool meanwhile slumped to their fourth consecutive defeat for the very first time in 11 years as Manchester United won yesterday 2-1 to end a near-decade-long wait for a victory at Anfield. Harry Maguire's 84th minute header secured back-to-back Premier League wins for the very first time in Ruben Amorim's tenure as United boss. 12 minutes from time, Cody Gakpo had cancelled out Brian Mbeumo's opener after just 61 seconds. Defeat leaves Liverpool 4 points adrift of Arsenal at the top of the table, and Arne Slot still searching for answers and how to get the right blend after spending near $660 million on new players during the transfer window. Let's hear from United coach Ruben Amorim.
Yeah, I think so. It doesn't mean a lot. It means today, but tomorrow is not going to mean a lot. It's 3 points, but it's a good victory. I will do the same thing that I did in the last games, is try to see the game, try to, in key points we had some luck, but we fought for every ball. We lost our composure a little bit in the second half.
On to this now. While the continent is celebrating today, this after Yassir Zarebri struck twice in a space of 17 first-half minutes as Morocco lifted the FIFA Under-20 World Cup with a 2-0 victory over favourites Argentina in Santiago, Chile on Sunday. So Morocco became only the second African side to win the competition after Ghana did so back in 2009 and are the first team to beat Argentina in an Under-20 World Cup final in 42 years. So the man of the match, Zarebri, opened the scoring on 12 minutes before doubling that lead for Mohamed Ohabi's men in the 29th minute. Morocco never looking back the rest of the way. Six-time champions Argentina had been the overwhelming favourites, having won all of their 6 matches leading to yesterday's final, with 15 goals against the 2 scored against them during the group stages of this year's tournament. But it was not meant to be on the evening for Argentina, who had not lost in the Under-20 World Cup decider since Mexico in 1983 to arch rivals Brazil. Odmati Mamani was named player of the tournament, while the final hero, Zarebri, took home the silver ball as the competition's second best player. The Atlas Lions Cubs have now written their names in gold, inspiring, of course, a new generation across Africa and beyond. On to some tennis news now. Elena Rybakina rallied from a set down to beat Russian 4th seed Ekaterina Alexandrova 3-6, 6-love and 6-2 and win the Nigbo Open title on Sunday as her late surge to reach next month's WTA finals gained momentum. So a 10th career title for Rybakina means that she can only, or rather has reached the semi-finals of the Pan-Pacific Open in Tokyo this week to seal the last qualifying spot for the season finale at the expense of Russian teenager Mira Andreeva. Others who have also qualified for the WTA finals will be held in Saudi Arabian capital of Riyadh from the 1st until the 8th of November are Arina Sabalenka, Iga Swiatek, Coco Gauff, Amanda Anisimova, Jessica Pegula, Madison Keys, as well as Yasmin Paolini. Meanwhile, a resurgent Daniel Medvedev claimed his first title for 882 days with a victory over Corentin Moutet in the Almaty Open final yesterday. The Russian, former world number 1, had a torrid year, winning just 1 match at the Grand Slams and then suffering a meltdown at the US Open just a few months ago. Medvedev's inconsistency on the ATP tour and struggles, of course, on his serve in particular led to him dropping out of the world at 10 and ultimately splitting with longtime coach Gilles Sevrava. Now working with Thomas Jonasson as well as Rohan Gotsia, Medvedev has steadily improved in the past month, culminating in a hard-fought 7-5, 4-6 and 6-3 victory over Frenchman Moutet. It is also Medvedev's first title since the 2023 Rome Masters and his first on the hard court since March of that year. Victory also means Medvedev has now won 21 titles at 21 different tournaments. At 7:37 a.m. Central African Time, we conclude your sports news on the second hour of Africa Rise and Shine. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, remember to send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11714 4459. I'm back with the final sports update on the show in the next hour. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Musibudi Makura.
Want to achieve
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Africa, it's time to play the beat of the continent. Tune in to Channel Africa, your go-to radio station that broadcasts in 5 different languages.
L'Afrique du Sud célèbre la journée nationale du
Kabla hujaitwa kwa jina la Double K
or more of our forests have been destroyed.
Partido Africano da Independência da Guiné.
See, Channel Africa represents every corner of this amazing land. From Lagos to Cape Town, Nairobi to Dakar, we've got you covered with the freshest news, music, and cultures. So, turn up the volume, feel the rhythm. Enjoy the conversation. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Let's now check in with the world of business as we say good morning again to Buntle Headbush, who will give us those details.
Business news on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Thanks, Asanda, and good morning. In our top story this hour, Morocco says it will allocate $15 billion to health and education in 2026. This is up 16% from last year. According to a statement from Morocco's royal palace, the decision to allocate this higher amount to these two sectors in the 2026 budget comes amid a sensitive social context marked by the resurgence of youth-led demonstrations in the country calling for better public services. In addition to spending on these sectors, the government plans to create over 27,000 new jobs in the sectors. Libya's Zuetina Oil Company has announced the repair of a leak of the crude oil pipeline that connects the Sabah and Zela oil fields. The company stated that its maintenance team managed to contain the leak on the 16-inch line. It says the team repaired the leak without recording any environmental impact or damage to nearby agricultural areas. South African Energy Minister Ndoro Ramokgopa says the country is pursuing a diversified energy mix which includes coal, nuclear and hydro. Ramokgopa has emphasized that this approach will help stabilize the country's energy supply and attract more investment as businesses suffer the most during load shedding and power outages. He was presenting South Africa's integrated resource plan, calling it the biggest post-apartheid investment in the country that the country has made. Ramokgopa addressed the media in Pretoria on the vision for 2030 and beyond.
Security of electricity supply. We want to talk of load shedding in past tense. We want to ensure that when the President and Cabinet says we want to grow the economy by 3 percentage points, that in fact we've got sufficient supply to support that growth. And that supply must be available now. The economy doesn't grow and supply comes later. So this security of supply is such that even if we've got multiple units failures, whether on the ESCOM side, on the private sector side, we must still have sufficient electricity for the economy to continue to operate. We don't subject our people to darkness. Multiple units failures, whether on the ESCOM side, on the private sector side, we must still have sufficient electricity for the economy to continue to operate. We don't subject our people to darkness.
We apologize for that sound. Moving on to the next highlight. South Africa's Democratic Alliance Party says there's been an astronomical increase in water tanker expenditure in the city of Tshwane. The DA claims the African National Congress, the Economic Freedom Fighters and Action SA Coalition over the city's unauthorized spending. DA Tshwane mayoral candidate Celia Brink says spending increased from just over $8 million to $10 million.
I've already written to Tshwane City Manager Johan Mettler to launch an investigation into this extraordinary unauthorized expenditure, and the DA will also be reporting the matter to the Public Protector.
China has accused the US of a cyber attack on a center that regulates its standard time. It warned that the serious breaches could have disrupted communication networks, financial systems and the power supply. The BBC's Bernadette Keho has the details.
Beijing has alleged that the US National Security Agency has been stealing secrets and infiltrating China's National Time Center, saying it found evidence tracing stolen data and credentials as far back as 2022. It said the US had exploited a vulnerability in the messaging service of a foreign brand smartphone to spy on the devices of several staff as well as computer systems. The National Time Center is a research institute that generates, maintains and broadcasts China's standard time.
And now taking a look at the indicators, one US dollar in Nigeria is trading at 1,468 naira this morning. In Botswana, it's at 13 pula 25. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 39. And in Zambia, it's 22 kwacha 71. Moving to the BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 real 40. Russia 81 rubles 11. In India, it's 87 rupees 98. China 7 yuan 12. And South Africa $1 is trading at 17 rand 34 cents this morning. $1 is trading at 74 pence to the British pound and 85 to the euro. Looking at commodities, gold is trading at $4,261 per ounce, platinum at $1,600 per ounce, while the price of Brent crude oil is at $61.09 a barrel this morning. And those are your business news. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Bontle Hetbush.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. From Cape to Cairo, Dakar to Dar es Salaam, rise and shine with Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda on Channel Africa.
At 7:45 Central African time, we head to Tanzania now, where the country is gearing up for general elections on the 29th of October this year, 2025. But the vote is taking place under a heavy shadow of repression. According to Amnesty International, the authorities have ramped up crackdowns on opposition figures, journalists and civil society, restricting free speech, assembly and political participation. Key opposition presidential contenders have been barred, arrests and enforced, disappearances documented, and extrajudicial killings reported. We now joined live by Roland Ibole, the regional researcher for East Africa with the Amnesty International, to assess what this means for democracy in Tanzania and the broader region. Roland, good morning to you. Thanks for making time to talk to us.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. Can you start by giving us an overview of what Amnesty International has found as far as Tanzania's upcoming elections are concerned?
I would say nothing really new in as far as in 2020, Amnesty International published a report, and the report we called it Lawfare, where we made findings about the late President Magufuli using various kind of laws to repress on the rights of Tanzanians before elections and to suppress dissent. This year, again, 5 years later in October, we are again publishing another report called Unopposed, Unchecked, Unjust, The Wave of Terror, sweeping Tanzania ahead of 2025 vote. And we are seeing a situation that has deteriorated since 2020. In this case, we are seeing a situation whereby before elections, political parties will be running, elections without presidential candidates, while others, like the main opposition party, Chama cha Demokrasia na Maendeleo, Chadema, will not be running the elections at all because it has been bad. Reason being, it did not sign, a code of ethics. We are seeing a situation whereby government critics have been disappeared, including critics who are in the ruling party itself. Others have been killed, others have been threatened, while others have been prevented from moving around even to do their own campaigns. So we are seeing a very fearful electioneering period. We are seeing an electioneering period whereby President Samia Suluhu Hassan will only need to be declared president, but will not really be facing challenge because she has simply suppressed all the challenge that is available to contest against her.
How widespread are these abuses that are reported, and who's mostly at risk or who's mostly targeted? We've mentioned political parties that are in opposition, journalists, as well as some civil society groups.
Anyone that dares to speak against the administration, anyone that dares to speak against even development agenda is targeted. I mean, in the report we mentioned a TikToker whose only offense was to make fun of the president, was arrested, imprisoned, with with an alternative of a fine. Tanzanians raised that money to rescue this young boy from prison. And not more than 2 days later, he's disappeared. And that is since sometimes in July has not been found to date. We have people such as Mdude Nyagali, government critics who, as in at the time he disappeared, was not running for politics, but are fierce government critics who has disappeared since May to date. We do not know where they are. We have even citizens, Tanzanians, who've dared to go to court to attend trial observation of Tundu Lissu, a presidential candidate or a former presidential candidate with Chadema, who were beaten, some of them tortured. We have two who reported to have been sexually assaulted at the time when they were actually beaten and prevented from going to court. We have, outsiders, foreigners, civil society organization actors, activists who've wanted to go to Tanzania just to attend court trial. And these people have not just been prevented from coming into the country for some of them, for others, such as Boniface Mwangi and Agatha Atuhaire, were abducted by state agents, held in communicado detention, tortured, and dumped close to their borders, where they crossed over and went back home. So we are seeing it is a fearful situation, not just for Tanzanian, dissenting voices, but also foreigners who attempt to go to the country in any form of solidarity. We also see newspapers which are getting bans, such as online Jamii Forums, a very big online, newspaper as an online platform, in Tanzania, where citizens have been, discussing and debating issues of national importance. This online platform was banned for 90 days just because of, posting something that the state did not like. We also see a situation whereby, beyond just the newspapers and all that we actually are seeing, we are seeing mass arrests of citizens who want to participate in, assembly or any form of political gathering. So the situation is dire. The situation is dire. Again, like we said in 2020, we are going into an election whereby the will of the people may not really mean much after the elections.
So how credible can these elections be then, with all that you stated, the abuses reported, as well as the fact that two main opposition leaders are barred from running?
I would not want to speak into the credibility of the election because Amnesty does not consider itself, an election monitor. We do not speak into how fair, how free, how just elections were. But one thing that I would say is that the conditions, the environment, the human rights situation around the elections are worrying in terms of just giving, political parties a fair platform to participate. As I've mentioned already, two main presidential candidates have been barred. One party, a whole opposition party, cannot participate in elections. I would say, for instance, the last, the barring of, the last presidential candidate, Luhaga Mpina, who was a defector of the ruling party, happened in an interesting way, whereby Luhaga Mpina was barred by the electoral body, and the party ACT Wazalendo, also an opposition party, went to challenge this in court. The court ruled in his favor and asked that the electoral body, lifts the ban and reinstate him to run for presidential, seat. But the electoral body disregarded the High Court ruling and barred him again based on the Attorney General advice to the electoral body. So you see, you're already seeing a situation whereby the electoral body itself cannot follow court orders. Seeing a situation whereby we are running into an election whereby CCM candidates, priests, and anyone else that would have been offered to be an observer cannot really freely speak. as about the elections. And lastly, just like in 2020, there is a law that prevents foreign journalists from, openly or independently reporting on electoral issues. These foreign institutions, one, have to be accredited, and two, have to be followed by a minder, and this minder has to be appointed by the state. So already you're seeing, even in terms of, the state being open to, criticism and being open to any electoral practices or issues being broadcasted is, not there. So we are really worried, not just for the freedoms, but what this means even in the region where there is cross-border repression.
Roland, thank you so much for your insights, and we value your time, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you so much for having me.
Roland Ibole is a researcher with Amnesty International Tanzania, speaking to Channel Africa about growing concerns over human rights and political repression ahead of Tanzania's general election.
New day, new stories. Start your morning right with Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Yeah, it can.
From Cape to Cairo, Dakar to Dar es Salaam, Rise and Shine with Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda on Channel Africa.
So, today in history, 2011, Asanda Beda, I want you to cast your mind back to the Arab Spring. It started in Tunisia, spread to Egypt, as well as to Libya. And it was the final end of someone who had been running his country for 42 years. He was captured and killed by National Transitional Council forces in his hometown of Sirte, and his death marked the end of the first Libyan civil war. Muammar Gaddafi died on this day in 2011. It was an incredible time, and the whole Arab Spring began with a young man who was a street vendor, and he was selling his wares on the side of the road, and the Tunisian authorities came to him and said, "Move away from here, you can't sell your things here." He went home and he came back to the same spot, and he set himself alight and died. And that sparked outrage in Tunisia. And before we knew what was happening, it wasn't just about him anymore. It was about Ben Ali and the way he had been running the country for decades. And then it spread to Egypt, and then it spread to Libya. And before we knew what was happening, the Arab Spring was in full flight. 3 long-time rulers were out of power, and Muammar Gaddafi sadly killed, and he was found in a sewage drain. I mean, it really, given his history, where he ended up was quite sad. In East Africa on this day, in fact, today is a public holiday in Kenya. It's called Mashujaa Day, and it's an annual public holiday to collectively honor all of those who contributed to the struggle for Kenyan independence and national heroes. And that's because in 1952, the Mau Mau uprising emergency declared by the governor of Kenya at the time, Evelyn Baring, declared the state of emergency in the colony. And this was in response to the Mau Mau uprising, an armed anti-colonial rebellion by the Kikuyu people and allied groups fighting against British rule, land alienation, political oppression, and the declaration led to mass arrests of hundreds of suspected leaders. And that is going back to 1952, a story I think in many ways played out in the rest of the continent, where colonial powers were trying to hold on to the lands that they had grabbed over time illegally. And there was resistance. Zimbabwe had its heroes, Mbuya Nehanda, and others. Namibia, the Herero, South Africa, of course, we know the story. So, yeah, today, public holiday in Kenya, celebrating heroes that had contributed to the struggle for Kenyan independence against the British.
Well, interesting days in history there. And in this next hour, we'll, as promised, take a look at that Zimbabwean story in more detail as we get reaction on Zimbabwe's ruling party, the ZANU-PF, having moved to extend President Emmerson Mnangagwa's term by 2 more years, potentially keeping him in power until the year 2030. We find out in terms of what that means for the country, what it means for democracy in Zimbabwe, and how the opposition intends to respond to that. That story and more will be coming up, of course, in this next third and final hour of Rise and Shine. And if you've just joined us, well, a very good morning to you. It is Monday, the 20th of October. My name is Asanda, Beda.
And I'm Peter Ndoro. It's time for the news. And with the news is Onel Nsidzi, and that'll be followed by your headlines, sports headlines with Musibudi Makura.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Zimbabwe's ruling ZANU-PF party plans to amend the constitution to extend President Emmerson Mnangagwa's term by 2 years to 2030, a move opposition politicians have condemned as unlawful. The proposal, adopted at a party conference over the weekend, would prolong the 83-year-old president's second 5-year term, currently set to end in 2028. The resolution comes amid a succession battle within ZANU-PF, where Mnangagwa's main internal rival, the former Army General Constantino Chiwenga, has been accused of treasonous acts. Channel Africa correspondent in Harare, Zimbabwe, John Kasim reports.
While the announcement did not come as a surprise, it changes the country's political story, as this will be the first time such a move has been done. Last year, at another conference in Bulawayo, a bold reaffirmation was made for the constitution to be amended and allow Mnangagwa to rule until 2030. Since then, fierce fights have emerged in the ruling ZANU-PF between two factions, that of Mnangagwa and Chiwenga.
3 witnesses are expected to testify before the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry in Pretoria, South Africa this week. Proceedings will be partially heard in camera from today to Wednesday. Their witness testimonies are expected to be in relation to their experiences as detectives investigating criminal cartels, Sibahle Mota reports.
Proceedings are expected to continue this week in line with the ruling handed down by Chairperson Justice Mbuyiseli Madlanga last week. Justice Madlanga ruled that witnesses this week will testify via audio in a remote location. This is also in line with an agreement reached between media houses Daily Maverick and Media 24 and the Commission's evidence leaders. Last week, Witness X, who was testifying remotely through an intermediary, encountered technical challenges which are believed to have threatened their life.
Officials from the Zimbabwe and Malawi High Commissions and the Limpopo provincial government in South Africa are today expected to meet with the families of the 43 people killed in a bus crash more than a week ago. The bus was carrying over 90 people. It crashed on the N1 on its way from Gqeberha in the Eastern Cape province to Malawi through Zimbabwe. The Limpopo Premier spokesperson Tirivali Moava says the aim is to support the bereaved families as they identify the bodies of their loved ones.
So these meetings marks the next phase in the identification process following the completion of the post-mortem examination conducted by the Forensic Pathology Services. The South African Police Service Victim Identification Center has also commenced scientific identification procedures, including the DNA analysis and fingerprints matching, in partnership with authorities from Zimbabwe as well as Malawi. So the Limpopo provincial government continues to offer psychological support services to affected families including trauma counseling.
Namibia's Ministry of Health and Social Services has declared an outbreak of Mpox in Swakopmund. The ministry made the announcement in a post on Facebook. It says surveillance, contact tracing and response teams have been activated. Mpox is a viral infection that can be spread from other animals. The virus causes flu-like symptoms and an itchy or painful rash. Lastly, Bolivia has elected centrist Senator Rodrigo Paz Pereira as its next president. He defeated the right-wing candidate Jorge Quiroga in yesterday's runoff vote. The election could signal an overhaul of economic policies, the BBC's Lone Wells reports.
Bolivia is facing severe fuel shortages, long queues at petrol stations, a lack of US dollars and soaring inflation. After years of economic decline and infighting within the ruling Socialist Party, many voters wanted change. Rodrigo Paz Pereira, a centrist senator, ran on the slogan "Capitalism for All." He pledged free market reforms, including lowering some taxes and import tariffs, while keeping social programs for the poorest.
For any news stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us at +27 11 714 4459. Channel Africa News, I'm Oneli Tsinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, Liverpool slumped to a fourth consecutive defeat for the very first time in 11 years against Manchester United, while the South African sides reigned supreme at the Africa Cup of Nations tournament in hockey. Details coming up at 8:30.
From Cape to Cairo, Dakar to Dar es Salaam, rise and shine with Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda on Channel Africa.
Right, it's 6 minutes past 8 Central African time. Let's start with this story before we go to Zimbabwe. The South African government's latest energy plan envisages the production of an additional 105,000 megawatts of power generated between now and 2039. That's 2.5 times the size of power utility Eskom's current installed capacity. And this is according to the Minister of Electricity and Energy, Dr. Josienzo Ramkgopa, who is officially unveiling Cabinet's newly approved integrated resource plan. Nompumelelo Siziba filed this report.
The Integrated Resources Plan is an important policy tool, serving as a roadmap of how energy production is set to unfold in the country over the next number of years. Minister Ramkgopa says never again should the country be caught off guard and not plan for economic growth in terms of energy availability and security.
We are going to be deliberate and intentional in ensuring that we achieve conditions of energy security, and this country will never again be subjected to load shedding. So that's what the plan seeks to do.
The minister said the Integrated Resources Plan anticipated the installation of 11,270 megawatts of solar PV power between now and 2030, 7,340 megawatts of wind power, as well as gas-to-power technology amounting to 6,000 megawatts, adding that this was an urgent issue to be addressed given concerns around Sasol no longer receiving direct gas from Mozambique by June 2026.
We know that we're talking about the gas cliff, us running out of the gas molecule, the molecules by 2030. We need to make an intervention on how we're going to replace the base load that will be taken out in 2030 must be replaced by an equivalent if you like, energy source that is able to give us base load, and that's the gas of 6,000 megawatts. You know, the IPP office has already gone out on 2,000 megawatts of gas to power. It's an important part of the conversation because this 6,000 megawatts has to come in place by 2030.
The minister noted that the government is acutely aware that the country's carbon footprint needs to decrease, but added that this didn't mean the abandonment of coal. In fact, he noted that the IRP is looking at possible experimentation with so-called clean coal technologies.
We are not making any mention of coal here. We are not making any mention of coal here. I'm talking of new generation capacity and or even extension of life of existing infrastructure. Because the point we are making is that there's a litany of clean technology solutions that are available, clean coal solutions that are available. What the RP says, it instructs ESCOM to say that we must go into a clean coal technology demonstration plant and that we must see the results by 2030.
Conscious of previous controversy surrounding nuclear technology procurement, the minister was clear to say that nuclear energy was very much part of the power agenda and that the plan is for it to play a major role in the economy going forward.
Nuclear we're building 5,200 megawatts of new nuclear capacity in this country. I have made the point that the state will not prevaricate. The state will ensure that we are very deliberate. We are transparent in the manner in which we are going to procure this clean energy solution. And nuclear, I want to say to the country that is a big part of what we'll be doing.
While 5,200 megawatts was the base case ambition for additional nuclear power, the minister did say that a further 4,800 megawatts could be possible if government's nuclear industrialization plan could come to fruition, but was cautious about this given the skills drain out of the country in this area of expertise. With all the grand plans for the country's energy future, Ramaphosa also spoke about the concerning trajectory of energy pricing and ultimately ensuring affordability thereof in the long run.
One of the big conversations now is the affordability of electricity. So we can say whatever we want to say about sufficient supply, for as long as that electricity is not available, it means that our people don't have access to this electricity. It means that industries will not be competitive, and as they lose the market share, they must put people out of jobs because the operational costs are such that they are not able to sustain them because they are losing market share. So it's important that we are able to minimize the cost of electricity to the economy.
In order for the aspirations of the IRP to be fulfilled, it will largely require the private sector to step in and make the necessary investments, a role the sector has been playing significantly since the relaxation of electricity generation policy in recent years. Nompumelelo Siziba, SABC News, Johannesburg.
As Zimbabwe's ruling party, the ZANU-PF, moves to extend President Emmerson Mnangagwa's term by 2 more years, potentially keeping him in power until 2030, the development has reignited fears of authoritarian consolidation in Zimbabwe. The ruling party, which has governed since independence in 1980, passed a resolution at its annual conference held over the weekend in the eastern city of Mutare, directing the government to initiate the requisite legislative amendments to make the extension possible. Critics see it as a direct assault on the constitution, which limits presidents to 2 5-year terms. Zimbabwe's opposition leader, Job Sikala, a veteran of Zimbabwe's pro-democracy struggle and former member of parliament, has long warned against what he calls creeping authoritarianism. He now joins us on the line to share his views on what Mnangagwa's term extension bid means for the country, the future of Zimbabwe's democracy, and how the opposition intends to respond. Thanks for joining us, Job. How are you this morning?
No, I'm fine. Thank you very much for inviting me to this breakfast interview.
Our pleasure. The ruling ZANU-PF party has endorsed a motion to extend President Emmerson Mnangagwa's term beyond the 2 terms that the Constitution provides for in terms of the limit. How do you interpret this move in terms of constitutional legitimacy and the rule of law in Zimbabwe?
No, the interpretation is very simple. It is the entrenchment of the authoritarian dictatorship in our country, whereby the center wants to entrench itself and continue with its politics of plunder and looting of the national resources. So basically, the Zimbabweans know that the resolution does not center on the need of Zimbabweans, but on the need to entrench the individual interests of the ZANU-PF looting elite, which has been known by several people in our country and also internationally, that they've been concentrating more on looting our national resources rather than solving the national problems that we are facing. So it is a protectionist provision which they want to do to our constitution, whereby those who have been looting and plundering our resources will be protected by the longevity of their existence in power.
ZANU-PF is insisting that the move will ensure continuity and stability in governance. Are you convinced of this and that it's a genuine attempt to maintain stability in Zim?
There is nothing more than the misinterpretation of the current situation in Zimbabwe. There is no continuity when the constitution clearly stipulates that after 2 terms of office, someone's term must come to an end. This is just an attempt to extend the looting and plunder that has been happening in our country for the past 7 years since these people come to power. And Zimbabweans know the truth, and they cannot be cheated by the concept of continuity which they are talking about. There is no individual who is irreplaceable anywhere in the world. Leaders come and go. And in Zimbabwe, we have got a constitution that protects those issues. So the antics which ZANU-PF is selling, that they want to have continuity in as far as issues of governance in Zimbabwe is concerned, is continuity of the looting, and not continuity of the development of our country in as far as we, the people of Zimbabwe, are concerned.
Mr. Sekala, Peter Ndoro here. Always good to talk to you. I'm just wondering, for people on the outside looking in and watching all of this play out, they must be wondering how it is that ZANU-PF is allowed to do what it does and been able to do this for so long. What would you say to them?
No, ZANU-PF thinks that they've got the monopoly for them to do whatever they want with Zimbabwe. They take Zimbabwe not as a state that belongs to everyone, but they are taking it as their own backyard. They are taking it as if it is their private property, to which it is now the time for the people of Zimbabwe to show and demonstrate to these people that this country belongs to all of us. And we are as much stakeholders to our country as them as well. So there is no one who is more important and superior in Zimbabwe than the other. So this is the issue that the message must be very clear to ZANU-PF that they've been doing this for a long time, and we cannot continuously allow them to continue on the same path.
As opposition voices, you're watching this annual People's Conference taking place, and it's quite clear that there are factions within the party. What's your take on what's playing out, and why does it matter for people in Zimbabwe who ultimately wins this internal ZANU-PF party fight?
No, but ourselves, we are not concerned about their internal fight. Although they have been been active participants in as far as factions within the opposition political organization was concerned. But ourselves, we are more focused on the issues that affect the generality of our people in Zimbabwe. As long as they fight among themselves, even killing each other and so forth, it's none of our business. What is the issue of our business is that we want the people of Zimbabwe to have the right for them to select leaders of their own choice when the term of office for the incumbents come to an end. There is no way we can allow them to take the constitution as if it belongs to ZANU-PF. This is a national constitution authored by the people of Zimbabwe, and the people of Zimbabwe have put a provision that after 2 terms of office, the office must become vacant to a new occupant.
Job Asanda again here. In terms of now mobilizing citizens and political opposition to stand against this move, should this proposed constitutional amendment go forward, how does the opposition plan to gather those dissenting voices? We've known of a heavy-handed response from the state when it comes to dissent and restrictions on assembly.
There is no any agenda that is united Zimbabweans of all walks of life more than this issue of trying to extend the term of office of Mr. Emmerson Mnangagwa. All the people of Zimbabwe are agitated against this. They are not prepared for them to be taken for granted anymore. Whatever the price that will be paid, while they are going to fight against this entrenchment of dictatorship in our country. All the progressive forces in our country, would it be political or in the civil society, are united in this agenda. It's not whether people like each other or not, whether we think alike or whether we are friends or not. It is the issue about Zimbabwe that now it is an issue that has united all of us. And progressive and democratic forces in our country are reaching out to each other to see how best they can come together, have an umbrella resistance movement for them to be able to challenge this. They are prepared to pay the ultimate price, whether it will be death, imprisonment, or whatever. As long as the agenda is pursuing the fight against the extension of the term of office for the president.
It must be very difficult for opposition parties. I mean, your own life story is a really good example of what can happen. 600 days of pre-trial detention, more than 70, 80 arrests in your lifetime, assassination attempts as well. SADC found the last election wanting. What do you have to do to change the situation in the country if the ruling party can get away with problematic elections and be accepted by regional bodies like SADC and the African Union? What then can you do as the opposition?
No, the issue that is confronting us is not a SADC issue. It is specifically a Zimbabwean issue. So it is incumbent upon us as Zimbabweans to put our things correct. So we are prepared for whatever the ultimate result that will come out of it, whether it will be imprisonment, whether it will be assassination, or whatever it will be. History will record that good men did not allow oppression to proliferate during the period of their existence. We cannot be silenced for us to speak out our own thinking about how dangerous it is for us to allow the Constitution to be mutilated for the interests of few individuals. The Constitution is a sacrosanct document which must be respected by anyone, no matter the office that you hold. Whether SADC is going to support us and other international bodies is neither here nor there. The challenge is incumbent upon us as Zimbabweans for us to be able to fight for our own freedom. So whether they will support us or not is not an issue. But of course, we have got quite a lot of international links. We are also going to inform and advise our friends in advance in terms of international lobbying to make sure that they are not going to watch whilst this regime start killing its own people. But the people of Zimbabwe are prepared to face whatever consequences that will come their way, resisting this act of trying to impose upon themselves an unconstitutional and unlawful extension of the term of office of the president.
Earlier on, we spoke about the internal wranglings within ZANU-PF, and you said that as opposition voices, you're not concerned by that. Maybe let me ask you in another way. Are there voices within ZANU-PF, perhaps more moderate, liberal voices, that would love to see change, that are prepared to engage with opposition? Have you spoken to any internal figures within ZANU-PF that you think might want to see a different outcome for the country?
There is no doubt that there are progressive elements and forces within ZANU-PF who are also opposed to this attempt to mutilate the national constitution. They are free to join us. We have not yet engaged anybody from ZANU-PF or talk to them, but they are free to engage us if they see that they are also opposed to the mutilation of our constitution. Will be available to welcome all progressive forces in our country to fight this abominable act that wants to roost our country.
When you say that you'll do whatever is necessary as opposition and you're prepared to face whatever, what are we going to start to see in the country? We hear about things like million-man marches. Will we see protests like we've seen in Madagascar, in Kenya, Sudan, Senegal even? Is that going to be something that the opposition may be forced to do?
What we will do is that we are going to engage the masses of our people first. We will not be able to take any action before we hear the form of response which the masses of our people want to take. So the first thing that we are going to do is for us to embark on an engagement process with the masses of our people. Secondly, an engagement of all progressive forces in our country for us to come to a consensus on a national view on how we are going to deal with the issues, with this very important issue that is confronting our nation. So the consensus that will be built around this subject should not only come from political elites or political leaders, it must be people-centered and people-driven. So we will hear our masses what they say. We will start now embarking on an engagement with our various constituencies to hear their views on how we should respond. And whatever we are going to get from the masses is the response that we are going to implement on the ground, without fear and without us relenting.
How do you ensure that the opposition voices don't get infiltrated? We saw what happened to the Movement for Democratic Change. We saw what happened to Triple C. How are you going to protect this new umbrella grouping that you're chairing at the moment?
Infiltration has always been part and parcel of the game since time immemorial, and it has never stopped to change when time comes. So they might try to use and apply their tactics of infiltrating, of trying to infiltrate us. But what we are going to do is that we'll make sure that the infiltrators' agenda will be frustrated. We'll frustrate the agenda of the infiltrators and we will proceed with the agenda of the masses of our people.
You said that it's a Zimbabwean story and a Zimbabwean solution is required, but I'm pretty sure that assistance and help from either neighboring countries or regional bodies can help Zimbabwe situation. What would you want them to do if they could do something for you?
It's for them to tell Emmerson Mnangagwa that he must follow the will of the people of Zimbabwe. We are not in contestation as per the requirements of the Constitution that when an extension of office is going to be done, it must be done via a referendum. If he wants to take that constitutional amendment to the referendum, so be it, so that the people of Zimbabwe will have their verdict. So in that, we will be able to give a fair ground for us to campaign also against the extension of his term of office, and we know we will defeat him. So what other international bodies and those who would be wishing to assist us should be able to voice the concerns of the majority of the people of Zimbabwe. The people of Zimbabwe don't want this extension of term of office. Completely not. So it is incumbent upon those regional bodies and other friendly forces in the region for them to know that the people of Zimbabwe are not in support of the term of office extension.
All right, so let's end where we started, and this is this bid to extend President Mnangagwa's term in office. What's the biggest risk for the country if this gets through, the constitution is changed, and this reality happens?
There is no doubt that it will create a national crisis, a huge national crisis that would need international intervention. And in terms of our own lobbying, other international forces and so forth, this crisis would really be a very serious crisis of unimaginable proportions that has never been witnessed in this country since time immemorial.
Mr. Sikana, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much indeed for giving us some valuable insights into the developments in Zimbabwe at this time. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Job. Zimbabwe's opposition leader there, Job Sikala, who's also the director for the National Democratic Working Group. That brings us to 8:30 Central African Time. Let's say good morning to Onele Nsinsi for news headlines.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Zimbabwe President Emmerson Mnangagwa's bid to extend his ruling tenure up to 2030 has been confirmed by the just ended ZANU-PF conference that was held in Mutare over the weekend. Mnangagwa has previously denied having ambitions to extend his rule, saying he is a constitutionalist. Namibia's Ministry of Health and Social Services has declared an outbreak of Mpox in Swakopmund, and the US President Donald Trump says the ceasefire in Gaza is still in place. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nsinsi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Right, let's catch you up with the world of sport, and watching all of what happened over the weekend is Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you so much, Peter. Very good afternoon, or rather, should I say, good morning from the sports desk. South African champions Mamelodi Sundowns started their CAF Champions League campaign with a dominant display against Nigerian champions Remo Stars. This was in the second preliminary round encounter played on Sunday. Although the Premier Soccer League heavyweights were playing away from home, they shone as well as dispatched their rivals and are now almost certain of reaching the group stages of this year's competition. Sundowns coach Miguel Cardoso was pleased with that result.
But this was another story to be written on this first match. My impression is that we took it very serious, that we related with the need that we had to make an approach tactically very clear, considering the study we had from Remo Stars. And it's curious because exactly the first goal we scored is one space that we knew that we could use to find a free player to kick. And not easy to play against a team that has a lot of man-to-man marking in all over the pitch. We had to find the pass breakthrough a lot of times, so find the third man so that we could find a free player.
Meanwhile, at the Stade de la Victoire in the Democratic Republic of Congo's Saint Ilo Lupopo stand Orlando Pirates of South Africa with a comprehensive 3-0 victory in their CAF Champions League 2025-2026 second preliminary round tie. That result leaves the 1995 CAF Champions League winners Pirates with an uphill task when the tie then shifts focus to Johannesburg this coming weekend. Meanwhile, in Yaounde, MC Algiers showed their their resilience following a 1-1 draw with Colombe FC. The host went ahead through a Ino Leombe, a goal in the 14th minute, but the Algerian substitute Ayoub Jezale then struck 5 minutes from time to give MC Alger a crucial away goal ahead of the return leg to be played in Algiers this coming weekend. Further afield now, Liverpool slumped to a 4th consecutive defeat for the first time in 11 years. This as Manchester United won 2-1 yesterday to end their near-decade-long wait for the victory at Anfield. So Liverpool had only lost one of the previous 14 Premier League meetings between the two sides, and United has not tasted victory at Anfield since the early days of Jurgen Klopp's reign in January of 2016. Let's hear from Arne Slot, the Liverpool manager.
It is a difficult moment because you know how it works in football. If you lose a game of football, if you lose 2, 3 or 4, the main thing is that the players need to keep believing in each other, and what we are doing is good. So if you play a game like this, I think they will be in the dressing room saying, what an amount of chances we had. But you can play a next game, maybe where you don't create as much, and this is always... Players, if you lose, players come off, thought they didn't have to be substituted, players who thought they had to play longer. These kind of things are quite normal in football.
On to hockey news now. The South African women's hockey team reaffirmed their continental dominance with a 4-0 victory over Ghana in the final of the 2025 Africa Hockey Cup of Nations tournament in Ismailia in Egypt over the weekend, also claiming their 8th title. Now, when the final whistle blew, it signalled yet another golden chapter in South African hockey history, an 8th successive African crown and a 6th consecutive final triumph over Ghana, underlining the team's enduring excellence on the continental stage. Now, that victory also confirms South Africa's place at the 2026 FIH Hockey World Cup as they continue to fly the flag proudly for the African hockey on the global stage. Meanwhile, the South African men's hockey team also produced a performance for the ages to defeat Egypt 5-1 in the final of the 2025 Africa Cup of Nations tournament, claiming their 8th continental title and also booking their place at next year's World Cup. It was the 7th consecutive AFCON title between the two African giants, the final between the two African giants, who had also played out to a goalless draw in the group stages earlier on in the week. Now, this time around, though, South Africa left no doubt about their supremacy, combining composure, structure, as well as brilliance in front of goal to secure the biggest winning margin ever recorded in an AFCON men's final. And that concludes your sports news this morning on Africa Rise and Shine. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, our email address is newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11714 4459. I'm back with more sports news with the On The Move team in the next hour. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Mosibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Gender-based violence is destroying lives and tearing communities apart. It happens in homes, in schools, at workplaces, and too often in silence. But it doesn't have to continue. If you see it, speak out. If you are hurting, reach out. Because doing nothing is not an option. Listen to all 19 SABC radio stations from Wednesday, 23rd of July for hard talk, discussions, advice, dramas, educational shows, and interviews around GBV with experts, survivors, lawmakers, and the whole country affected by gender-based violence. For all your favorite SABC radio stations, call 0800 428 428 to report abuse or get help. GBV, it ends with you. This message is brought to you by the SABC.
Now let's find out what's happening in the world of business. Here's Buntle Headbush to bring us up to speed.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thanks, Asanda. Good morning. And our top story this hour, South African civil society organisation, The Green Connection, has raised concerns over the cost to consumers in government's recently announced electricity generation plan. Electricity and Energy Minister Kgosientsho Ramokgopa yesterday announced an ambitious plan to build 105,000 megawatts of new generation capacity by 2039 to the value of almost $127 billion. The integrated resource aims to stabilize the country's energy supply, attract investment and promote economic growth. As part of the IRP, the country will see a shift in its energy mix with cleaner energy sources like hydro, nuclear, wind and solar, reducing the country's reliance on coal. Community Outreach Coordinator at the Green Connection, Neville Van Roy.
The plan itself is a little bit confusing, claiming emissions reduction and affordability, which we both question in terms of the gas to power plan as well as nuclear that is presented, both of being, which is expensive gas, being expensive on the climate and on people's pockets. We do welcome the renewable energy and the storage capacity with that will be growing, but there is construction of energy infrastructure which we do not know who will bear the cost.
South Africa's Democratic Alliance Party says there's been an astronomical increase in water tanker expenditure in the city of Tshwane. The DA blames the African National Congress, the Economic Freedom Fighters and Action SA coalition over the city's unauthorized spending. DA Tshwane mayoral candidate Celia Brink says spending increased from just over $8 million to $10 million.
I've already written to Tshwane City Manager Johan Metler to launch an investigation into this extraordinary unauthorized expenditure, and the DA will also be reporting the matter to the Public Protector.
Morocco says it will allocate $15 billion to health and education in 2026. This is up 16% from last year. According to a statement from Morocco's Royal Palace, the decision to allocate this higher amount to these two sectors in the 2026 budget comes amid a sensitive social context marked by the resurgence of youth-led demonstrations in the country calling for public services. In addition to spending on these sectors, the government plans to create over 27,000 new jobs in the sectors. Libya's Zuetena Oil Company has announced the repair of a leak of a crude oil pipeline that connects the Sabah and Zella oil fields. The company stated that its maintenance team managed to contain the leak on the 16-inch line. It says the team repaired the leak without recording any environmental impact or damage to nearby agricultural areas. China has accused the U.S. of a cyber attack on a center that regulates its standard time. It warned that the serious breaches could have disrupted communications networks, financial systems, and the power supply. The BBC's Bernadette Keho has the details.
Beijing has alleged that the U.S. National Security Agency has been stealing secrets, infiltrating China's National Time Center, saying it found evidence tracing stolen data and credentials as far back as 2022. It said the US had exploited a vulnerability in the messaging service of a foreign brand smartphone to spy on the devices of several staff as well as computer systems. The National Time Center is a research institute that generates, maintains and broadcasts China's standard time.
Now taking a look at the indicators, one US dollar in Nigeria is trading at 1,468 naira this morning. In Botswana, it's 13 pula 25. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 39. And in Zambia, it's 22 kwacha 71. Moving to the BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 real 40. Russia, 81 rubles 11 this morning. India, 87 rupees 98. In China, it's at 7 yuan 12. And South Africa, $1 is trading at 17 rand 34 cents this morning. $1 is trading at 74 pence to the British pound and 85 to the euro. Looking at commodities, gold is trading at $4,261 per ounce. Platinum at $1,600 per ounce, while the price of Brent crude oil is at $61.09 a barrel. And those are your business news. I'll be back with another update in the next hour. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or give us a call on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Bontle Headbush.
business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective. New day, new stories. Start your morning right with Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
As South Africa marks Transport Month this October, a new player in the logistics sector is reshaping how bulky goods are moved across the country. Mr. Transport, known as Mr. T, has officially launched as South Africa's first on-demand delivery platform for medium to heavy loads. The platform, developed by Good Earth Group in partnership with Nika Technology Group, aims to create sustainable livelihoods for youth and women drivers, contributing to inclusive growth within the transport industry. Joining us further now to discuss on the line is Terence Smith, who is Chief Executive Officer of Good Earth Group. Terence, good morning to you. Thank you for making time.
Morning to you and morning to your listeners. Thanks for having me. I'm quite honored. I'm actually a maiden visitor to your channel, so quite chuffed about that.
Our pleasure, and thanks for that. What inspired the creation of Mr. T or Mr. Transport, first of all, and how does it address gaps when it comes to South Africa's logistics industry?
Well, I think thanks for getting the acronym right, Mr. T, which is Mr. Transport. So Mr. Transport was started in 2020, 2021. It was started for internal application only, and we were never a generational transporter, which meant we knew very little about the industry and had to adapt and learn very quickly. So part of the adaptability was embracing tech at the time, and we used it exclusively since then up until 2024. And due to its overwhelming success within our own organization, we decided to go open market in September this year. So what that simply means to a driver that comes onto our platform, it means that we come, unlike most tech entrepreneurs or students that are studying tech, they dream of putting out the next app and becoming an instant billionaire. And in our case, the difference is we come to the market with deliveries that we put on our platform. And then similarly, for the customers that use our platform, we come to the market with expertise over a couple of years and not just having gone open market and hoping for the best.
The platform has reportedly completed thousands of trips in its first year. What would you say has contributed to this early success?
Well, I think the fact that we've gone on to onboard corporates, we've been fortunate enough that we've signed up 2 corporates or retailers on a national level, and we do their deliveries exclusively through the Mr. T or Mr. Transport app. And as such, we are doing roughly 11,000 tons per month, or 13,000 deliveries per month, and at the advanced stages of signing on even more corporates. So the incentive for us to go open market to the general man on the street was simply to say, well, our platform will allow our customers to connect directly with the transporter, and there's no longer necessarily a dependency on the retailer having to provide the transport. You can do it through Mr. T directly.
In what ways is Mr. T empowering youth and women in what is traditionally a male-dominated sector?
Yeah, so I think with Mr. T, unlike most people, we don't just talk the talk, we walk the talk. We accept the reality of that statistic you've just shared, and we've deliberately and intentionally, you'll see with our marketing efforts, we deliberately and intentionally target youth and women owners and drivers, as you say, within a male-dominated sector. We're proud and quite chuffed with ourselves that at this stage, we've already, only having launched in September, we already have 3 women owners, which if you go into our various marketing platforms, you'll see we feature them there as well. We've got a lady in KZN, we've got a lady in Johannesburg, and we've got a lady in Cape Town. And in fact, the lady in Cape Town is an owner driver. And then we've got quite a bit of youth within our platform as well already. The only criteria is the youth have to be older, 18 years or older. But we've tried to remove any barriers that may present themselves for a woman or youth to join our platform.
What is the response like from this group, or these two groups, young people and women, when it comes to getting involved in the transport or logistics sector? Are you finding that there is interest?
Yeah, there is interest. I think that's speared mostly by the fact that I think we all know that unemployment is a reality in our country, and worse so when it comes to the youth, hitting numbers of 50% and above. And I think they are motivated purely by the opportunity to become an entrepreneur or find a alternative stream to generate a bit of revenue. I think that's the first and primary reason for the interest that has been shown. But I think with the focus on women empowerment and youth empowerment as a secondary reason, there's no longer that reluctance to get into an industry that was historically perceived as a male-dominated industry. And there's also been some good role models within the industry that inspire both women and youth to come on board. So we quite overwhelmed by the interest that is shown.
Given that October is Transport Month, how does the launch of Mr. T align with South Africa's broader transport and mobility goals?
So you'll see that the timing of our launch, we launched open market in September, although we used it internally initially. We launched in September, deliberately keeping in mind that October is Transport Month. And what we did was we did a soft launch during September, and we started our hard and aggressive launch, which is why we're chatting today, during the month of October. And what we've been doing since then up until now is we've been encouraging driver partners to come on board and get the experience of the app. And then similarly, we've been trying our best to get independent customers that will use the service in the future to download the app, and working towards using October to work towards that perfect storm. Most tech businesses need that perfect storm to accelerate them. And fortunately for us, we've tapped into our existing database of customers that use us on a daily basis. But similarly, having gone open market in October, like I say, was to build up towards that perfect storm. I think for most tech and app services, COVID 2020 was that perfect storm. We're hoping that November would be our perfect storm, given the fact that it's Black Friday and Christmas shopping and peak shopping commences from Black November onwards.
So Mr. T is certainly offering a solution, but generally speaking, when we look at the heavy goods transport industry in the country, how big of a challenge is it for this transport to be reliable, and what opportunities could those challenges pose?
So I think let's first define what is Mr. T, just so that your listeners can get a better understanding of it, and then I'll maybe answer that question at the same time. So Mr. T is like any passenger e-hailing service. Mr. T is an app or a platform that connects or that specializes in medium to large goods, that connects a customer directly with a transporter that is available at that time, real time, anywhere nationally in the country. So that's a little bit about Mr. T, but how does Mr. T overcome those challenges, and how does it, to answer your question, how does it get medium to heavy goods moving quickly and fast? So there are challenges because not everybody can move medium to heavy goods quite quickly. The difference with Mr. T is that we've got a combination of our own fleet, which we've been running and operating for a while. We've got a national footprint, and we've got regional operators that service the country in all major provinces within South Africa. Similarly, and this was what motivated us to get Mr. T open market, was that we could never have a fleet that was big enough to service everybody all of the time quick enough, which is why we then went on to onboard on top of or over and above our existing fleet. We've gone on and onboarded and will continue to onboard independent third parties. And like we've discussed, preferably a fair amount of women and youth entrepreneurs to come on board and partake in our platform so that we can service the demand, especially when peak times hit, and not necessarily just throughout the course of the year. So with having a higher number of service or transport operators on the platform gives us the agility and flexibility to service these medium to large goods with a dash of speed, and in most cases same day delivery services, unless it's a super bulk item that requires a little bit of logistics planning. But if you are at Macro or Builder's Warehouse or one of the retailers buying a medium-sized item, let's say, for example, you're buying a TV, historically, you would need to slot into the retailer's delivery schedule. And I'm sure you've been in this situation once or twice where you were told, ma'am, your delivery will be done on Tuesday because we're in your area on Tuesday. Mr. T allows you, while you're standing at the retailer, you do not need to slot into their delivery schedule. You can literally, like I say, like one of the passenger e-hailing services that currently exist, go and request a vehicle that suits the size of the goods you're moving, and anybody within the area will accept your delivery, and you can have it delivered to your place of residence immediately. Similarly, you could be overseas and you may want to assist a family member in getting, again, a small to or medium to large good delivered immediately. You can do it from the luxury of whichever country you're sitting in and just simply put in your pickup and drop off address. And again, somebody will accept your order and make your delivery happen right then and immediately. The larger goods, because of it being large goods, do need a bit of logistics planning, but that can also be done in a short space, far shorter than it currently and has historically been.
Looking ahead, then, what do you think the sustainability and technology roles will be in terms of the company's long-term strategy and plans?
Well, I think the move to electric vehicles is gaining more and more momentum, and that currently exists predominantly within the passenger vehicle sector. In terms of the commercial vehicle sector, we, from a sustainability point of view, have already done advanced research on electric vehicles within the medium to large size vehicles or commercial vehicles. And selfishly, we've made a decision that we will be migrating into that space. And two reasons for that. I think one, obviously the sustainability factor is important, and we want to be a responsible company within South Africa. But similarly, and hence I say selfishly, the incentive to want to adopt electric vehicles is there for the business owner and any of our partners on the platform, because anyone within the logistics space will acknowledge that the biggest cost factor within your business is indeed the fuel, which can rank or sort of range from 35 to 45% of your total cost. And electric vehicles bring about that cost saving to you. So from a sustainability point of view, we've consciously made the decision to move ahead. In fact, the demand is so great in South Africa right now that the only vehicle within the 3-ton and 4-ton space, there's one brand in the country, which I won't mention on the radio, but they are fully sold out at this stage due to the fact that a national big corporate has pre-ordered all of them. So we wait patiently, but we are excited to embrace that aspect of sustainability and look forward to it and would like to be one of the pioneers in that space where we can proudly and confidently go out and promote the fact that we have embraced sustainability to its fullest.
Thank you so much again for your time, Terence. We appreciate it.
Thank you, and thanks for having me.
A pleasure. Terence Smith is Chief Executive Officer of Good Earth Group. They are developers of Mr. T or Mr. Transport. It's South Africa's first on-demand delivery platform for medium to heavy goods.
Yes, Brother Benjamin is in the house to tell us what's going to be happening after 9 o'clock and the On the Move program. And it's award-winning, by the way. We have to always mention that. Because it is.
You do not have to. You do not have to. We've never pressed on it. We hardly talk about it.
We are proud.
We're pretty humble about it. Well, today we're going to be speaking about something that many people think is a privilege. You know, you have many privileges, I think, that you have in a marriage. I'm not married, but I know once I get married, I'll probably have many privileges in a marriage. When it comes to, moments with my significant other, right? Mm-hmm. But, there are privileges that can be very dangerous if you do not ask for consent. And we're going to be speaking about sexual violence in marriages, because when people think they're married to someone, they almost have this kind of ownership perspective, and whenever I demand sex, I should be getting it. But people forget that you also need consent within a marriage situation.
No, that is a very, very true statement. And things like lobola, patriarchy often create that impression of righthood, that men sometimes have. So that's going to be our main focus today. We're going to be speaking to Mfundo Ntandane, who's a macro level social worker and scholar on that one.
All right, well, that's coming up on The Move. But as Rise and Shine, we are leaving you. And we'll be rising and shining with you again tomorrow morning, bright and early, 6 till 9. We'll be together. My name is Asanda Beda.
I'm Peter Ndoro. The news is next with Onele Nsinsi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Looking at your top stories. Zimbabwe President Emmerson Mnangagwa bids to extend his ruling up to 2030, and U.S. President says ceasefire in Gaza is still in place. Your latest news. Greetings to our listeners. Zimbabwe's President Emmerson Mnangagwa's bid to extend his ruling tenure up to 2030 has been confirmed by the just-ended ZANU-PF conference held in Mutare over the weekend. Mnangagwa has previously denied having ambitions to extend his rule, saying he is a constitutionalist. This resolution means his deputy, General Constantino Chiwenga, may not be able to take over from Mnangagwa in 2028. Channel Africa correspondent based in Harare, Zimbabwe, John Kasim.
It is the entrenchment of the authoritarian dictatorship in our country, whereby the center wants to entrench itself and continue with its politics of plunder and looting of the national resources. So the Zimbabweans know that the resolution does not center on the need of Zimbabweans, but on the need to entrench the individual interests of the ZANU-PF looting elite. So it is a protectionist provision which they want to do to our constitution.
The South African Parliament's ad hoc committee investigating the KwaZulu-Natal Police Commissioner Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi's allegations will resume its work tomorrow. Police Minister Senzo Mchunu, who has been on special leave since July, will continue giving evidence, while the former crimes intelligence boss Richard Mdluli has formally requested to testify before the committee. Mchunu has so far defended his decision to issue a directive to disband the KwaZulu-Natal Political Killings Task Team in December last year. He says he briefed President Cyril Ramaphosa on the decision and he backed it. Mkhwanazi has accused senior police officials, including Mchunu, of corruption, interfering in police operations and having ties to criminal syndicates. Officials from the Zimbabwe and Malawi High Commissions and the Limpopo provincial government in South Africa are today expected to meet with the families of the 43 people killed in a bus crash outside Luiktrigard more than a week ago. The bus was carrying over 90 people. It crashed on the N1 on its way to Gqeberha in the Eastern Cape province to Malawi through Zimbabwe. The Limpopo Premier spokesperson Chilivali Muava says the aim is to support the bereaved families as they identify the bodies of their loved ones.
So these meetings marks the next phase in the identification process following the completion of the post-mortem examination conducted by the Forensic Pathology Services. The South African Police Service Victim Identification Center has also commenced scientific identification procedures, including the DNA analysis and fingerprints matching in partnership with authorities from Zimbabwe as well as Malawi. So the Limpopo provincial government continues to offer psychological support services to affected families, including trauma counseling.
Namibia's Ministry of Health and Social Services has declared an outbreak of Mpox in Swakopmund. The ministry made the announcement in a post on Facebook. It says surveillance, contact tracing and response teams have been activated. Mpox is a viral infection that can be spread from other animals. The virus causes flu-like symptoms and an itchy or painful rash. And lastly, U.S. President Donald Trump says the ceasefire in Gaza is still in place. His statement comes hours after health officials in the territory confirmed that Israeli airstrikes have killed more than 40 people. Israel says this was a retaliation of the killing of 2 of its soldiers near Rafah in southern Gaza. Hamas has denied any knowledge of the incident. The BBC's Yolanda Nell.
Israel's military launched dozens of strikes after it said its troops operating in Rafah in southern Gaza were attacked by Hamas fighters, but within hours it said it had resumed enforcement of the ceasefire. Israeli media say that a decision to close aid crossings to Gaza was overturned following US pressure. Mr. Trump's special envoys Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner had already been